Hi fellow seekers, my name is Nadia and today's topic is of profound interest to me. I think this is probably one of the most important videos I'll ever make on this YouTube channel. It's all about the sign placement of the moon in the natal chart. So if you're interested in learning more about how the moon manifests in each of the 12 zodiac signs, this video is for you. I will cover basically the essential traits of the placement, the strengths, the unique qualities of each of the 12 signs of the moon, and I'll also go through the potential challenges and shadow sides of each of the placements. Before we start with the moon in Aries, just a very quick note to explain why the moon is so very important, and actually it's the most important planet considered in Vedic astrology. In Western astrology, the sun signs seem to be the most important, but when it comes to Vedic astrology, they recognized that the moon is the most important for our quality of life and for how we actually perceive the world around us. And why is that? Well, first of all, the moon is manas in Vedic astrology, the mind. And so it represents our consciousness, which actually also entails also our subconsciousness. So it's the consciousness through which we perceive everything around us. It's the mind, the lens of the mind through which we see ourselves, we see other people, and the filter through which we see every experience that happens to us. So the state of our mind ultimately determines our experience of life here on Earth. So understanding our moon sign in depth gives us profound understanding of our emotional and psychological making and world and inner world. And also understanding our partner's moon sign, the moon sign of everyone in our life, gives us that much more depth of understanding of what they go through and how they perceive and experience life. So first of all, what is the moon in astrology? In Vedic astrology, as we mentioned, the moon is called the significator of the manas, which rules your mind and mental faculties, but it's not the thinking and analytical part of your mind, which is more Mercury, but rather something deeper. It's the part we refer to when we say from the heart. It's our emotions, our intuition, our inner world, and how we experience life on Earth. The moon is said to be fluid and changeable like water. In fact, the moon is described as a watery planet in Vedic astrology. And just as water reflects light and changes with its environment, water always adapts to the vessel that it's put in. That way, your mind and emotional nature respond to the world around you. You use your moon to perceive and to adapt to your environment, and you're influenced both by internal and external circumstances. The moon is fickle, the moon is changeable. It goes through different phases, right? And the same thing goes with our mind. We change our mind all the time. Our thoughts are racing, our feelings are fleeting and changeable. The moon is a little bit like wearing a pair of glasses constantly and not even realizing that we're wearing them. We see everything through those glasses. So the moon colors our entire internal perception of things. The moon also represents our private, our inner world. So unlike the sun, which shines publicly and dominates the day, the moon comes out at night. It rules your private world, the intimate, unseen parts of your life that happen behind closed doors, the domestic sphere, your home, your family, your personal sanctuary. The moon is your inner authority, your intimate nature that most people don't see unless you trust them enough to show it. So the moon sign is how very, very few people understand your inner nature. In fact, if you have an intimate partner or very close friends or family members, they probably see you more as your moon sign than as your sun sign. The moon also represents feminine energy, receptive and nurturing energy. The moon is fundamentally feminine energy because it only rules one sign, the feminine sign of Cancer. So it's fully receptive. And in every chart, regardless of your gender, it represents a receiving, receptive, nurturing principle. The queen in the sky illuminating the darkness being our consciousness, which is invisible to the eye. And so the moon also shows us how we learn to feel safe from childhood. It signifies the mother and more broadly, how you nurture yourself and other people. It's about creating comfort, finding safety, and building healthy foundations. The moon yearns for connection, for intimacy, for emotional union. It's what makes you feel at home. And why is that? Because the moon represents our separate consciousness. It's how we perceive ourselves as separate from everything around us. That's why life on Earth can be a little bit lonely, a bit painful sometimes, because ultimately what we're seeking is to merge with something bigger than ourselves. And the moon here is described in Vedic astrology as lovesick because it's the moon through which we crave this kind of connection and seek to dissolve these boundaries of individual separation from other people, from the universe, from God, ultimately. So the moon is how we feel at home. So think about your earliest experiences, your infancy, the first year of life, when you're dependent entirely on your environment and the nurturing that you received. That's the moon. It represents how you learn to feel safe, how you bonded with your caregivers, and how you developed your sense of emotional self-sufficiency and comfort in the world. So here's what your moon sign actually tells you. It reveals what makes you feel emotionally safe and secure. It shows what you need to feel loved and cared for. And keep in mind, I'm using those specific words, not what you need to be loved, but what you need to feel loved. So someone could shower you with love, but if it's not in a language that your moon can really understand and feel connected to, it just might feel empty to you. So usually we find things that are familiar the most comforting, which is why it's so important to have a lot of nurturing and, healthy connections in our earlier environment and upbringing, because that's what we end up chasing and seeking throughout the rest of our lives. So the moon reflects how you process emotions and how you respond to your environment. It's your emotional nature, not your actions, not your personality, but your feelings, your sensitivities, your inner world, your imagination, your memories, the way you perceive your joys and your sorrows through your five senses. The moon sign also gives you social confidence and sensitivity. It's how you interact with other people and how aware you are of the emotional temperature in a room. It also represents our imagination, our perception. So the beauty of understanding your moon is that once you know what you actually need emotionally, you can stop waiting for others to figure it out. You can build your life intentionally. You can choose partners, friendships, environments that genuinely support you based on what you need to feel safe and loved. And if you're trying to understand someone you care about, knowing their moon sign is like finding the instruction manual to their heart a little bit. And as we said before, this is your private sphere. So people who are close to you, such as family members, will notice the characteristics of your moon sign much more than your sun sign. So let's explore. Each of the 12 moon placements has a completely different emotional nature, different needs, different ways of loving, and different gifts to offer to the world. And as we go through each one, you might find yourself in there, or you might recognize someone that you care about. So as we go through each of the 12 signs, I hope you feel seen, you feel understood to some extent. I hope you develop a very profound understanding of your inner world, and so you can continue down your life path with more knowledge and wisdom about your own inner workings and really understanding what it is you need to feel safe, happy, fulfilled, and nurtured. I really hope it's helpful to you. Let's dive in. By the way, if you don't know your moon sign, or if you want to check how I check moon signs and how I check birth charts in general, I use vedicastrology methods, as you know, but also I use the tropical zodiac. Of course, you're free to use whatever system resonates with you, but this is what I have found to be the most accurate so far in my studies. So you can find the free birth chart generator on my website, which is thewhyof.u. And then in the first menu here, we have free chart. Once you click on that, you can enter your birth details, which are basically your date of birth, time of birth, and place of birth. The exact coordinates will be entered automatically by the system once you click on calculate chart. And then you will have all the details you could possibly need. You have your birth chart details here to confirm if everything has been entered correctly. Then you have the standard birth chart wheel, which is what Western astrologers typically use. Then I have also included a visualization of your South Indian chart. This is including the 7 traditional planets up to Saturn, but also including Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, in case you want to also check those positions. And of course, Rahu and Ketu, the north and south nodes of the moon. And then there is a list of planetary positions given, so you can check exactly which planet is in which sign, in what degree, and in which house. Finally, also a list of houses and points, so you can check, for example, all of your house cusps, including the ascendant, the descendant, and your midheaven, what exactly the sign position is, and the exact degrees. And then I've included a table of planetary aspects, but this is based on Western calculations. In the future, I will include also the Vedic way to calculate exact planetary aspects. But this will be the first version. I hope you will find it useful. If you needed to check the signs of your planets, that is absolutely enough for now. So what can we learn about the emotional nature of people with Aries as their moon sign in their natal chart? What are their unique traits, qualities, and strengths? First of all, since Aries is ruled by Mars and it's the very first sign in the zodiac wheel, these people are initiating and action-oriented. They're emotionally fulfilled through action and they tend to be pioneering. Aries is about laying foundations, so people with this placement feel content and secure when they've initiated something new, something meaningful to them, and they're successfully starting projects that will last through time. They need to feel like the founder rather than the follower, and this is at their emotional core. Aries is said to rule the head. So these people are strongly identified emotionally with their opinions, ideas, and thoughts. They are independent thinkers who come to conclusions through their own inner process rather than following the opinions of the crowd. What they find deeply satisfying is to be proud of their own ideas and to follow their inspirations into successful action. Since Aries is a fire sign, qualities we associate with the moon in Aries are independence and authenticity of thought and action, since the fire sign rule the 1st, 5th, and 9th house, which are the self houses, the houses of authentic self-expression. Fire signs in general are guided by intuition and they need freedom of self-expression. So moon in Aries people feel free to make their own minds up about things. They like to venture beyond their safe zone without being constrained or feeling fenced in. Their authentic self-expression is an absolute non-negotiable. At the same time, because they are the first sign in the zodiac and they're ruled by Mars, they have this childlike directness and innocent approach to life and to other people. At their healthiest, they approach life with the innocent, open mind of a child, ready to explore, to apply logic, common sense, to figure things out by themselves, and to form their own independent viewpoint without strong preconceptions clouding their judgment. Since Aries is a Rajastic sign that is ruled by Mars, they tend to be emotionally invested and experience intense highs and lows in their emotional world. So Mars combined with the Rajas creates powerful emotional swings. When things go well, they feel strong pride, sense of achievement, sense of excitement about life. But when things don't work out, they equally experience profound disappointment and a sense of failure. Without intensity and passion, however, they can feel lackluster or even melancholy. They kind of need this kind of intensity and passion to drive them forward from ideas into action. Moon in Aries people tend to be risk takers. They have a conquering mentality, and that's because they're symbolized by a ram, a wild ram, that is exploring rocky, hard to reach places in nature. So Mars here combining with fire gives them a penchant for risk taking and the courage to pursue what many others don't dare even attempt. They see themselves as the general of their own life because Mars is the general in our charts. It's also the warrior archetype. So Aries moon people tend to lead their own adventures. They see obstacles and challenges as big opportunities to prove themselves, to show their willpower and courage. When it comes to their love life, they tend to be quite obvious and unapologetic. When they fall in love, they become sometimes completely obsessed and quite extreme about their passions and their love. Their infatuation is pretty much obvious to everyone, and they're very proactive about their romantic interests because it's a masculine sign, right? So they are proactive rather than receptive. They live in the moment without concern for future consequences, and they're driven by pure and honest, unfiltered emotion. People with the moon in Aries can also be described by their intense focus and strong will, but not the strongest follow-through. The symbol of Mars as a planet is a circle attached to a pointed arrow. So when it comes to displacement, these people can be very focused, with very sharp mental capabilities. Let's not forget that the sun is the planet of creative intelligence and it's exalted in the sign of Aries. So people with the moon in Aries tend to be naturally intelligent and capable of great willpower and focus. However, because they're a movable sign, which means they're changeable, in Western astrology, we refer to them as cardinal signs, which means that they lack the sustained planning and follow through that fixed or earth signs naturally possess, for example. So they're better and more kind of passionate at the start of initiatives than following them through to completion. However, as we said, when Aries is strong in the chart, when the moon is well placed, they have the capacity to lay foundations for very big, very ambitious projects. Also, moon and Aries people tend to reinvent themselves throughout life because, as we said, Aries is the first sign and it's a fire sign about the self. So Aries is fundamentally about the question, who am I? Because it's a movable sign, their identity isn't fixed or stable. And so through their various adventures, challenges they overcome, different ideas they go through, they explore different actions, they constantly discover and rediscover different aspects of themselves, reinventing themselves as needed. So they don't have such a rigid sense of identity. Although in the moment, everything that they experience feels very much them, because as we said, they very much identify with their thoughts and with their actions. But you will see that throughout life, they tend to go through these phases where they reinvent themselves. But it's always authentic. It's coming from a place where they feel that this is genuinely who they should be in that very moment. What about the emotional needs of Moon in Aries? What do they need to feel safe, comfortable, and fulfilled in life? First of all, they need freedom. They need freedom to make their own minds up about things, freedom to venture outside their comfort zone, to explore different avenues, different adventures. And being constrained, being fenced in, being told what to do undermines their sense of security and emotional well-being. They simply don't feel safe relying on others to tell them how to think and how to act. They like to feel freedom to express who they truly are on the inside through their actions. Also, they need acceptance and action-based admiration to feel happy. So the people in their life that are close to them, because Moon is about our emotional world, and typically we let a very small circle of people into our innermost intimate world, right? So we're talking here about ideally what they expect from their partners, their close friends, their family members. They need people in their life to accept their restless, passionate, adventurous, and ever-evolving nature rather than expecting them to be constant and predictable. They crave admiration for their courage and willingness to take actions where others hesitate. Because again, this is a masculine sign, so it identifies with their actions. So they like to feel love and respect not purely by default, just because I love you and I'll always love you, but rather they like to feel the admiration of people that they love specifically for their actions and their achievements, and especially their courage and willpower. They also like to feel a sense of challenge and growth in their life. Otherwise, they can get a bit complacent, they get a bit down and depressed sometimes. They feel most at home when they're challenged and they're a little bit uncomfortable. They need adventures, uncertainty, endeavors that promise growth, success, and the opportunity to test themselves and to prove themselves. Climbing risky mountains, metaphorically, because again, we're talking about the ram inhabiting rocky places in the symbolism of Aries. So this is what feels safe to them, just taking risks, going on adventures, taking on challenges. For others, that might be the opposite of a safe space, but emotionally, that's what makes them content and happy. Another thing that makes Moon and Aries people happy are a sense of adventure and innovation. So they're nourished by feeling like a pioneer in a certain field, an innovator of some kind, a leader in an area that they truly care about. New pastures, new horizons are essential for their sense of security and well-being. On the other hand, they also love novelty. They love new horizons to explore. Again, it's a movable sign, and the Moon here craves excitement, novelty, and new horizons to explore. Without the sense that something is happening, something is changing, something is moving, they can become gloomy and depressed even. So activity and change itself are essential to their emotional well-being. That's why, an easy way for them to lift themselves out of low moods could be taking on a new adventurous hobby, traveling to distant places, going on a kind of courageous adventure where they stand up for a cause that they believe in, or simply doing a lot of proactive kind of sports that really push their adrenaline up. Moon and Aries people also like to feel a sense of uniqueness about themselves, and they like to feel visible particularly in their domain, even though they're not as concerned about the opinion of other people. Again, this is a self sign, so it's all about they need to feel proud of themselves, but at the same time, they want to feel that their actions matter in the world, that they stand out from the crowd somehow. They need a sense of bigness about themselves and their life, even if it's not something that they don't need everyone to clap for them. They don't need everyone to approve of their actions, not at all. But within themselves, they need to have a sense of feeling that what they're doing is important, that it's aligned with their ideas of what is valuable and purposeful in this life. If they feel completely unnoticeable, invisible, or especially if they feel that what they're doing doesn't really make a difference, if it's not important, really just something to pay the bills, this will probably make them depressed in the long run. They also need partners in crime. So partners who, rather than trying to keep them safe and keep them restrained into their comfort zone, they actually encourage them to go on adventures together. Like a ram needs fellow rams from the herd when climbing those risky, rocky mountains and cliffs, they need companions who will go on adventures with them, people who understand and support their pioneering spirit and their restless nature. So rather than, being afraid for them or kind of trying to caution them to not go onto these kind of challenging pursuits. Rather, they want someone who applauds them and supports them and, encourages their bravery. And finally, they need excitement and passion in their life. This is a fiery sign. It's ruled by Mars. Mars is definitely about intensity and passion. When things go well, they can feel strong pride, achievement, and excitement. A new adventure can quickly reignite their sense of excitement about life. And without intensity and passion in their lives, they can feel quite lackluster and uninspired. Now, every moon sign has its challenges, its potential problems with self or others, some potential shadow sides that I thought it would be useful for us to explore. And this is not at all to sound judgmental or to point out negativity or anything like that. Rather, I think life can be a bit challenging sometimes, and we all can fall into unproductive, unhealthy, or darker moods. And I think if we go over them and address them, people will feel seen and their struggles being recognized, and they will develop the strategy to address them better. So this is why I thought it would be useful to include this section as well. So first of all, one of the potential challenges with displacement is that they tend to act first and then think later. This is something that I think almost anyone who's familiar with astrology would be aware of. This is a bit of a cliche about Aries people, that they're very impulsive. So Aries moon people have a tendency to jump head first into things without careful consideration of potential consequences to their actions. They also lack healthy detachment from the outcomes of their action, as their ego is very, very invested in everything that they take on. And this can lead to naive decisions sometimes or unforeseen problems. Another potential challenge could be their strong passions and intensities. On the one hand, this can be their core strength, but at the same time, being fiery and passionate, they can sometimes suffer negative consequences from following their strong passions without considering the bigger picture or the long-term implications of their actions and passions. So being careful, performing, their due diligence and doing long-term planning before they act is not really their strong suit, as many of us know. They can sometimes get in hot water due to their directness and unfiltered communication. Mars is considered a cruel planet, so sometimes their communication can be quite direct, lacking in tact or pretense. This, of course, can be a strength. We all say that we love honesty and directness in people, but let's face it, in the world of human civilization and communication, tact and diplomacy can go a long way into not burning any bridges for future endeavors. So combined with Aries' directness, and Mars' kind of lack of tact and pretense, people with displacement can accidentally hurt other people's feelings through their unfiltered communication, and they may lack awareness of social niceties. As we mentioned already, Moon and Aries people can have very strong ideas and opinions about everything, about life, about other people, about themselves. At their worst, they can become highly opinionated, wanting to kind of push their beliefs on others and getting agitated when people hold differing views from theirs. Their opinions are very important to them, as we said. They identify with their thoughts and opinions and ideas, and so they can become a little bit aggressive about defending their viewpoints sometimes. Another potential challenge can come from their self-will and assertiveness, because Mars is so focused on what it wants to achieve that it can pay no heed to life's niceties and other people's agendas. Their strong personality and self-focus can make partners feel like supporting characters, as if their partner's desires and goals matter less than their own. And so finally, their individual and self-focus can be a little bit of a challenge as well. So rather than being flexible and open to what the world offers, Moon and Aries people are always kind of trying to bend circumstances to their will. When they set their mind on something, they really want to go to extreme lengths to achieve it and to challenge themselves to achieve it. And so this can cause frustration when they really can't control outcomes, and it can also cause tension when reality doesn't match their vision. They may not adapt well to other people's needs as well because of this kind of strong-willed nature. Now let's look at people with the moon in the sign of Taurus. What does it mean for their unique essence, their traits, their emotional needs, and potential shadow sides? First of all, let's go through their traits, strengths, and qualities. The moon in Taurus people tend to be emotionally grounded and secure in themselves. The moon is exalted in the sign of Taurus, which means that it functions at its optimal level here. People with displacement tend to be emotionally grounded, possessing an inherent understanding that their thoughts and internal expectations are largely responsible for how they feel. So this creates like a sense of groundedness, a sense of inner control and stability. Their attitudes are typically based on a balanced assessment of their lives. Another trait of theirs is that they're naturally open and able to receive from life, because Taurus is a feminine sign that is ruled by Venus, a very kind of receptive, nourishing planet that enjoys the good things in life. The receptive nature of the moon feels perfectly at home here in this female Venus ruled sign. People with displacement are subconsciously open to receiving the good that life has to offer them, whether in the form of natural inborn skills and talents, a loving and supportive family, a generous spouse, or simply the right environment. They're basically just very open to seeing the opportunities around them and benefiting from them without any kind of apprehension, resistance, or sense of guilt or shame about making the best of what life is giving to them. And they have a need for stability and long-term security. Taurus is a fixed sign, so the moon here seeks material security and stability, wanting to preserve what it already has accumulated. Moon in Taurus people value stable and long-term situations in life, both in their business and their personal life as well. And they're not really big fans of frequent changes and would rather build on and expand from stable foundations rather than constantly changing and trying new things. Moon in Taurus people tend to have a gentle, peaceful, and nurturing attitude. The moon, as we know, is the most gentle planet because it only rules one sign, which is the feminine sign of Cancer. And Taurus is the gentlest sign, really, because the symbolism is about bovine creatures that speaks to peace, gentleness and attitude, and body movement. We associate cows in a green pasture with a sense of tranquility, with a sense of comfort and peace. And being closely attached to those in their daily surrounding is another thing that is characteristic of cows and other bovine creatures. So cows are extremely attached, for example, to their calves. They're very nurturing, very, very attached mothers, and they provide abundant nourishment to them. And so people with displacement tend to be equally capable of giving and receiving, being a grounding, stable, nourishing, and helpful influence in other people's lives. So on the other hand, we see bovine creatures very willingly accepting the safety and the nutrition provided by people who take care of them. At the same time, we see them forming very strong bonds, not only with their offspring, but also with other cows in the herd. And so they tend to be characterized by these strong bonds. And since Moon is the planet with which we connect to other people, it's a very social planet, is a planet of intimate connection. So being in this sign is a really, really comfortable place for the moon, which is why it's exalted here. Moon and Taurus people very much value harmonious and mutually beneficial relationships. So they prioritize acting in a way that doesn't burn bridges unnecessarily and making sure that harmony and good-natured attitudes are maintained for everyone's sake. It's a sign ruled by Venus, right? And Venus is the diplomat, the most tactful and diplomatic connective planet when it comes to social graces. So they understand the importance of behaving well with others to maintain civil and loving relations, especially with those that live alongside them regularly. They're kind of herd, their close environment. I have a friend who's a Taurus sun person, and she really refers to her friend as like my herd. I need to take care of my herd. On the other hand, people with the moon in Taurus offer both practical and emotional support to others. So their approach to love combines the watery, gentle nature of the moon with the gentle, earthy, Venusian qualities of Taurus. This is an earth sign, so practical matters are of very big importance here. They care for their loved ones in very tangible, grounded ways, while being emotionally supportive and gentle as well. They expect the same in return. So not just words, of comfort from others, but actually real practical care and protection. So I can count on you and you can count on me for anything. That's kind of the vibe here and how they form friendships and intimate connections and partnerships. Moon and Taurus people are very much drawn to being useful and of value to society. Taurus as a sign belongs to the Vaishya caste, which is the merchant slash artisan class, and the focus here is on being valuable and skilled. People with displacement feel happy when they feel valuable to society and receive appropriate compensation or recognition in whatever form it might be, further strengthening their sense of self-worth. So basically, they align their actions with being valuable to others. They're receptive to whatever, recognition and remuneration they can receive for the quality of the help they provide, the services and products they provide. And this further strengthens their own internal self-esteem and self-worth, because Taurus as the second sign is very much about feeling worthy in and of ourselves. Now, the combination of Moon in a Venus ruled signs means that people with displacement perceive simple pleasures as psychological necessities, because the Moon rules the sense mind and Taurus thrives on tactile and sensory experiences. So things that we can taste, we can touch, we can smell, and we can hear. So Taurus gives the Moon the capacity for pleasure and enjoyment, which helps us feel satiated in life and face life's hunger and harshness. So if you think about it, if it wasn't for life's niceties, life wouldn't be very much worth living, right? Because there's a lot of harshness to life, to the reality of living on Earth, the realities of being in human society. There's a lot of beauty here, but also a lot of harshness, cruelty, and difficulty. And so Venus is the planet that provides the comforts, the pleasures in life that make life beautiful, colorful, and worth living. So when Moon is in this sign, people intuitively understand how important this is, both for our physical health and our psychological health. So basically, Moon and Taurus people recognize that simple pleasures are essential for their psychological balance. Also, Moon and Taurus people generally tend to be friendly, down-to-earth people who are quite diplomatic in nature. Taurus is said to inhabit the environment of villages or very, very small towns. So the energy here is that you know a lot of people in your environment by name. You collaborate with your neighbors, with your townsmen in mutually beneficial ways, and you kind of feel safe in that environment. It feels very familiar, very nourishing to you. You know that you can count on others. This is kind of the vibe here. And so when people have displacement in their chart, they understand the Venusian art of diplomacy and maintaining great long-term mutually beneficial relationships in life. They tend to be friendly, talkative, and earthy in their relating and communicating with other people. Very kind of solid and down to earth and just naturally good-natured. So what about the emotional needs of a person who has Moon placed in the sign of Taurus? First of all, they crave material security and stable foundations in life. They need financial stability, secure living situation. It doesn't have to be, millions of dollars, billions of dollars, extreme luxury. No, just feeling secure and stable in your finances. So you don't have to be worried and anxious on a day-to-day basis. So they need financial stability, secure living situations, the assurance that their material needs are met. This isn't greed, it's just the understanding that on planet Earth, lofty ideals alone don't ensure survival and thriving. Remember, Moon is the planet that helps us adapt to our environment and survive in the best way possible. So in this kind of very earthy Venusian sign of Taurus, people have an innate understanding that practical realities of Earth should not be discounted and should not be minimized. So they're not satisfied with mere sweet talking, appearances, and promises. They want kind of material manifestations of love as well. They also have a core need of harmony and mutual support within the tribe. So reliable, present partners and friends. They need people in their life who are predictable and genuinely present. Consistency and follow-through matter far more than grand gestures. So Moon and Taurus people, as we said, are very fixed in their ways and they can be very supportive of their loved ones. So they offer this kind of unwavering support to their loved ones and presence in their lives. And of course, in return, they expect the same from their inner circle. They also need community, close connections, harmony in their relationship. A tight-knit community of family and friends is extremely important for people with displacement. They don't need a large group of friends and acquaintances, and they're really not that concerned with their societal status and image. What they need really is presence, reliability, support when it's needed. Feeling part of a larger support system is deeply important to their sense of safety and stability in life. They also need predictability, a sense of predictability in life. The fixed nature of Taurus means that they thrive on knowing exactly what to expect from their day-to-day experience. They are predictable, reliable, and able to shoulder great responsibilities with ease. These are people you can really, really count on. And they have an innate preference for arrangements that last a long time. They need others to be equally steady and dependable as they are. They also have a core need to feel useful, valuable, and valued by others. They need to feel valued for their contributions, recognized for what they bring to other people's lives. They need opportunities to develop and express their personal talents because, Venus is about arts and crafts and beauty. So whether that be through arts, cooking, music, or other practical, tangible skills, they like to feel recognized and valued for them. Recognition for their usefulness strengthens their sense of self-worth and gives them purpose. And one of the reasons why this placement is so strong for the moon is that when Taurus feels that they're not being reciprocated accordingly, when they feel that they're giving, but they're not receiving the acknowledgement and the value from other people that they should be for everything that they're contributing, they can withdraw and they can find a new environment because they need to be in an environment that makes them feel worthy and valued and respected and loved. Just kind of like, the cow is sacred in India. People revere the cow. And so, Taurus is very much about, okay, I know my worth, and if you don't recognize my worth, I'm not interested in being with you any longer. They also need to feel nurtured and cared for, and that can include both physical nourishment, such as food, comfort, beautiful clothes, and also emotional nourishment, so gentle words, presence, reliability, and these are both essential. They will feel at their best in environments that make them feel valuable, valued, and taken care of, and safe. As we keep saying, this is a fixed sign, and so emotional stability through strong self-worth is really, really important for their consistent contentment with life. Female signs in general act well when they feel well, so it all starts with the feeling. And Taurus is a feminine sign, so when the moon is in the sign of Taurus, people feel and act well when they feel good about their own self-worth. When they have problems with their self-esteem, that can really disturb how they act out in the real world as well. And this is really foundational for their emotional safety. Feeling good about themselves enables them to show up fully for others as well. Finally, they need sensory comfort and pleasant environments. They thrive in comfortable, aesthetic, pleasant to the senses environments. Engaging their senses, taste, touch, smell, sight, and sound is essential for their well-being and brings them inner joy and balance as well. So creating beauty and comfort in their surroundings helps them to feel emotionally settled. And again, this is not about luxury or being superficial. It's simply recognizing that, we are infinite souls, but we are currently trapped in physical bodies on the material realm. The earth is a very, very earthly place, right? So it's in the name. And so we can't go without our material comforts if we want to really feel secure and feel safe and comforted. And moon in earth signs recognizes that very well. So every sign has its potential challenges, problematic areas, especially when there are issues in the chart affecting the moon. So what is the shadow side really of moon in the sign of Taurus? First of all, their stubbornness can be problematic. Fixed signs may be sometimes too stubborn for their own good, relying too much on their own resources rather than being open to what life can present them with, or they're kind of incapable of adapting as life evolves around them. So this stubbornness can cause problems as the moon is fundamentally about adaptation and flow. And so, as you can imagine, we succeed in life best when we are very perceptive to what is happening around us, because then we can prevent problems and we can also take advantage of great opportunities that come our way. If we're very fixed in our waves, if we're very consistent, sometimes we can miss out on opportunities. And so that's one of the potential challenges of the moon. On the one hand, the moon likes the stability that Taurus provides as a fixed earth sign, but stubbornness can sometimes be a bit of an issue here. So another potential issue with displacement is loyalty taken too far for their own good. So again, their fixed nature might prevent them from being adaptable when they should be. And this can apply to relationships. They could stay in relationships or situations for a very long time before deciding to call it quits, even if they can see and feel that things aren't really working out between the two people. It's important for them to learn to recognize when it's really time to move on, because as scary And, inconvenient as change can be, sometimes it really is the best possible solution. Hi. Another potential issue of the moon in Taurus placement can be very strong dependence on their close environment. So while their need for community and tight-knit connections is generally a strength for this placement, over-relying on our immediate environment can limit our perspective in life. So people with the moon in Taurus can become too entrenched in their ways and the expectations of the tribe, and they miss out on opportunities for growth and exploration, beyond their comfort zone and their current environment. People with the moon in Taurus can sometimes overfocus on the material side of life, and this is a potential issue for all the earth signs. But Taurus is a rajastic sign. Rajastic signs have a penchant for kind of excitement and really feeling attached to the outcomes of their actions. They can get passionate about things, and since this is an earth element, we're talking about getting excited about comforts, luxuries, and sensory pleasures. So people with this placement might be prone to disappointments due to expecting too much from the satisfaction of their material desires and identifying too much with material accumulation rather than realizing that many things are out of their control. Rajastic signs really see themselves as the doer in life. They don't really recognize that there is something out there, a bigger power, that means that some things are really beyond their control. And as such, because they think everything is dependent on their action, they can get very, happy and excited when things go their way, but they can also get more disappointed when things don't go as planned and when they don't get the outcome and the result of their actions that they were hoping for. And so, basically, when we're talking about the earth element, they might get disappointed that, they were expecting, okay, as soon as I buy this dream house on this dream street in this beautiful neighborhood, all my problems are going to be solved. The moon is all about feeling happy, feeling fulfilled in life. And so they can rely a bit too much for their fulfillment on the material things in life. Another potential issue could be their limited perspective because of lack of exploration. So if they become too stuck in their ways, too comfortable in their comfort zone, too stuck on their rigid kind of viewpoints that they've already established, they may miss out on new experiences and understanding that could enrich their lives and their emotional well-being. So while Aries is a little bit too adventurous, sometimes too changeable, too much excited about challenges that can sometimes land them in hot waters, Taurus kind of has the opposite problem where sometimes they're too stuck in a certain way of doing things and they might miss out on broadening their horizons and miss out opportunities to enrich their lives and their emotional well-being. Their habits, attitudes, and viewpoints rarely change, which can prevent growth and adaptation. So this is the general kind of theme of resistance to change and transformation. As you know, the moon changes throughout the 28-day cycle. Sometimes it's waning, sometimes it's growing, and it symbolizes growth. It enables plant growth, the tides of the oceans and everything in the earth is all about constant change, constant transformation, constant ebbs and flows in life. And in this kind of fixed nature of Taurus, people can be a bit resistant to changing their habits, their viewpoints, just being open to transforming, open to really changing their life, because in the end of the day, nothing really stays the same on Earth, right? We're either growing or we're dying in a way, metaphorically speaking. They can truly learn from their opposite sign, which is the sign of Scorpio, to be open to big psychological and emotional transformations, trusting that they have strong internal resources to survive whatever shift or ending is necessary. So being kind of a little bit more open to the idea that change and transformation is not only sometimes good, but it absolutely is necessary in life, and stability is great, but it can't always be the norm. So this is the big lesson for Moon in Taurus. Moving on to the moon in Gemini in the birth chart. What does it tell us about a person's unique traits, strengths, and qualities when they have Gemini as their moon sign? What we know about moon in Gemini is that they tend to have an intellectually oriented emotional nature. So what does that mean? The moon here knows things through what is said and communicated rather than pure intuition and feeling. The native's mental attitude and general nature are oriented towards intellectual knowledge, social learning, relating knowledge, and dispensing information. This is a sign by Mercury, right? So it's all about the analytical mind, communication, camaraderie, collaborating with other people. People with the moon in Gemini tend to have a balanced and adaptable approach to life. They're not really prone to radicalism or rigidity. As a mutable dual sign, Gemini combines fixed and movable qualities, making the moon here more balanced and adaptable to change as situations require. And Gemini as a sign is not prone to extremes. There are no planets exalted or debilitated in the sign of Gemini. And Gemini is ruled by the planet Mercury, which is all about balance, fairness, equality. And so people with displacement don't really like extremes in life. They don't like rigidity, and they prefer things to feel quite normal, balanced. They're nimble and adjustable in their attitude and mental approach, which makes them likable to almost everyone. People with the moon in Gemini strongly identify with their knowledge and skills. Again, this is a mercurial sign, right? So knowledge makes them happy. They identify strongly with what they know, the information and skills that they can access at any given time. It's a very cerebral sign. It's a sign of communication and collaborating with others, about teamwork, but very much also about perfecting one's own skills, being really clever, being witty, finding ways to do things, to organize systems. And so people with displacement are motivated by progress, by improvement. They view life as a journey of feedback and optimization. And their sense of security comes from their own strengths, their abilities. And this is not so much things that they're born with, but also things that they develop through time, that they, for example, they have the desire to write, and so they become excellent writers, so much so that they're confident that whenever they need something from someone, they can write an excellent letter and just convince people through their eloquence. So that can be one of the skills that they're working on perfecting, and then they derive a sense of security, being comfortable in the knowledge that they excel in certain things and they can achieve whatever they need in life through their own skills. So yeah, their sense of security comes from their strengths and abilities. They can take care of themselves through what they're able to do. They also take pride in their quick wit, sense of humor, their communication skills, and their strategic intelligence. So we know Mercury is the jokester. Mercury is a very, very clever, very nimble and quick planet. And so ruling the sign, people with displacement identify strongly with their intellect, with their humor, with their talent, skills, and abilities, and specifically skills that they have mastered and perfected through practice. So being praised and recognized for their mental capabilities, their organizational capacity, their optimization skills is very important to them. They feel very, very proud of their skills at organization and improvement, and their intelligence and wit are central to how they navigate the world. They want to navigate through analyzing things, thinking through things, planning, strategizing, and organizing. And they tend to adapt their persona to what the specific situation requires for a best outcome. Mercury is the actor in Vedic astrology. If you have Mercury as a career planet, you can definitely be excellent at acting. And so Moon and Gemini people can change their personality depending on the context. They adapt through developing various skills, talents, and personas, adjusting their approach based on what the situation requires. This versatility makes them highly effective communicators and collaborators as well. This is in contrast, for example, to fire signs. Fire signs are very much about my way or the highway. This is me. Take me for who I am. This is authentically me. I have my own opinions about things. I'm not changing them to suit your comfort, to be palatable to you. In contrast, Mercury is a very adaptable planet, a very manifesting planet. And one of the reasons people with strong Mercury in their chart are usually very successful in life is that they have this very human quality of progress and adaptation. And so Moon in a Mercury sign can be a very, very capable person who can truly adapt to whatever the situation requires. Gemini rules the arms in the human body. And so people with Moon in Gemini derive their sense of security from their strengths and their abilities. They simply feel strong and capable enough to handle anything that life throws at them. They can take care of themselves through what they're able to do. This self-reliance through competence is central to their emotional stability and well-being. And what gives people with displacement the most enjoyment? Of course, fun and games. So they enjoy activities that engage skill and dexterity. For them, fun means utilizing their craftiness, their intellect, their practical skills, dexterity, and talents. And so anything from fitness to dancing, drawing, solving puzzles, playing games, anything that engages the skillfulness of the human mind brings them genuine happiness. They are constant learners and experimenters with diverse interests and hobbies that keep their active mind engaged. I mean, if you know people with strong Gemini in their chart in general, they're very good at games. And why are they so good at games? First of all, because they're quite clever and quick-witted, but also because they simply love games more than any other sign. And when you love something, you practice it, you genuinely have fun with it, and so you become consequently very, very good at it. You know, the people in my life who are the best at card games and kind of games like Monopoly, for example, have strong Gemini in their chart. So it's a very playful, very fun-loving sign. Moon and Gemini people love to be social, to gather and to share information. So communication is very important to Moon and Gemini people. They not only love to receive and process new information, but they also love to share and disperse it. So again, this is a human sign. It's represented by a pair. They're depicted as a man holding a mace and a woman holding a flute. So it represents the variety of human skills and abilities and the potential for human progress. And so anything related to collaborating with other people, complementing each other so that, you know, our skills complement and we can achieve more together than separate, this is very much a Gemini theme. And so when you have Moon in the sign of Gemini, you typically really love to communicate with others, to share information with others, to complement each other's skills. Gemini is one of the most social signs in the zodiac, and so people with displacement thrive in environments where they can communicate ideas widely and connect with diverse people through various networks and exchanges. You know, fire signs usually prefer like-minded people because they're quite intense about their viewpoints and their beliefs. And so if you clash in terms of your kind of nature and beliefs, there can be a bit of conflict, and they would prefer to go their own way undisturbed by other people's, in their mind, nonsensical opinions. Gemini is not like that. Gemini is completely comfortable coexisting with other people's, skills and varied opinions and talents and viewpoints, and they feel that there is richness in that because, again, that's human society. Human signs are all about understanding the variety that each human brings to the tapestry of society, and they understand that progress is made precisely through collaborating together. So this is a very core need for Moon and Gemini to collaborate effectively with other people. So let's specifically talk now about the emotional needs with this placement. So Moon and Gemini people, as we said, they need collaboration and communication-focused partnerships. So when we talk about intimate relationships here, they prefer partnership and relationships where they can collaborate, work together with others to achieve successful outcomes. So the focus is on achieving something together. They need people in their lives that they can have real conversations with, share common interests and ideas with, collaborate toward mutual goals, and intuitively they understand the power of collaboration. So this is a core need for them to express. Actually, the funny thing about Gemini is that it's surprisingly one of the most relationship-focused signs that you will find. In fact, I think together Moon and Libra and Moon and Gemini are probably the moon signs that crave and really need partnering up the most out of all the moon placements. Of course, that depends on other factors as well, but all other things being equal, I would say Moon and Gemini and Moon and Libra are the most social and the most craving of partnerships and relationships. They don't really like doing things on their own. They see much more value in collaborating with other people. Another one of the core needs of Moon and Gemini people is intellectual stimulation and variety. So they will only be happy with a partner or an environment that really stimulates them intellectually, provides variety, or even a little bit of challenge, something that they can, utilize their creative intellectual juices to work towards a solution. And air signs in general, they need a sense of movement, progress, and variety because air is the element that moves things around. So they don't like situations that stay rigid and unchanged for too long. And without intellectual engagements, without any kind of cerebral action going on, they can become depressed or feel stagnant. So they really need to put their skills to use. Otherwise, they might get a little bit bored and lack motivation in their life. Another core need of Moon and Gemini is emotional lightness, a sense of friendly relations, nothing too intense, nothing too extreme. They prefer to receive diplomacy, tact, and friendliness in speech from those around them. And this is not because they're overly sensitive. In fact, this is not really a very vulnerable, very sensitive, emotionally placement. But at the same time, they don't like rigidity. They don't like radical, strong opinions. They don't like cruel relations with other people. They like things to be balanced, to be easygoing, to be not too overwhelming, emotionally heavy and such. So they don't really appreciate anything too radical or too rude directed at them. So they're sensitive to harsh communications, because even though Mercury is a very easygoing, friendly planet that can see the humor in everything and doesn't take itself too seriously, the moon is a very gentle, very receptive and absorbing planet. And so this is their emotional nature. So they prefer to be on friendly terms with everyone, to collaborate with everyone, to not be kind of on bad terms with people, to not, bring harsh communication into the picture. They prefer interactions that are characterized by friendliness, and they have a respect for the power of words. So when they say something, they mean it. They have very good control over what they say. And actually going too deep and too intense emotionally and psychologically can scare them a little bit. They prefer to keep things a little bit more lighthearted. Another need of theirs is balance across life domains. So they like to maintain balance in their life by not overly focusing on work, friends, partnership, but rather doing sufficiently well in all areas. They like to keep everything kind of balanced within their life, not tilt the scales too much in one direction. So, for example, they like to balance health, hobbies, friends, work, money, and family. This is typically not a very kind of workaholic type of placement, or, obsessed in love, forgetting everything else in life type of placement. They need sufficient rest and enjoyment on a regular basis to feel good, as burnout comes from overwork without adequate balance and recreation. So they need a sense of fun, a sense of lightheartedness and variety in their life. They don't like to over-focus too much on one area and burn themselves out. They also need regular social contact and diverse relationship. They need to be around others regularly and find fulfillment through togetherness and company. As I said, this is a very social sign, and it needs partnering with other people. So Moon in Gemini people would be happy among different social networks, connecting with friends, with teammates, with diverse people, talking with clients, taking jokes, making jokes with business partners and such. Isolation and loneliness can drain them quite a bit. They thrive when they have diverse activities, hobbies, interests, and social engagements that keep them intellectually stimulated, their kind of creative juices flowing. They also like to feel acknowledged for their skills and intelligence. So they like to surround themselves with people who consider them smart, who like their wit and their sense of humor, who they appreciate talking with. They need to feel recognized, praised, and remunerated for their intellect, for their ability to organize and optimize. So they're very good at managing things. And so managerial roles, both in their personal life and professional life, really, really suit them. They can be team leaders, they can be great managers, they can manage their own business as well. And their various talents and capabilities should be recognized by those that they love, otherwise they wouldn't feel happy. Recognition for their contributions and abilities matters deeply to their sense of self-worth. So they like to view themselves as someone very capable, very intelligent, very good communicator, very funny, very nice to talk to. This is kind of the opinion they have of themselves, and they like to have that mirrored in the people who surround them on a regular basis. And finally, as we said, work-life balance will be important for these people. They need sufficient rest and enjoyment. They don't like this whole hustle and workaholic vibe and culture. Burnout can come from overworking without adequate balance of recreation. And so they need opportunities to engage in leisure activities of some sort, social enjoyment alongside their productive work. So they can be like work hard, party hard type of people. Ideally for them, they would have like a working environment where they get to communicate with people, work with a lot of moving parts, be really managing everything, being in charge of organization and collaborating with different business partners, clients, communicating effectively with everyone. And then at the end of the day, going for a nice little restaurant or bar where they continue joking around with their colleagues and relaxing their mind from the harshness of reality. That would be like an ideal scenario for them. Finally, let's look at the potential shadow side of this placement. Every moon sign has its shadow side and potential challenges and problem areas. And so let's see what those are for Moon and Gemini. First of all, they may lack assertiveness and passion, especially when standing up for themselves or pursuing their goals. That can be a potential problematic area because Mercury, which rules them, is considered a neutered planet, and they tend to not be very overtly pushy or assertive as people. As we said, they like to keep things a little bit more easygoing, friendly, lighthearted. But, when we remove intensity, we also remove assertiveness and passion for our goals and for what we want to achieve. So this can mean that they lack sometimes the boldness needed to stand their ground in some situations or to pursue ambitious goals with single-minded determination. Sometimes in life, when something is really important to us, we need to be a little bit extreme, a little bit strong-willed and pointed towards it. So they may rationalize what they want to believe rather than seeing things clearly, allowing ego and desires to compromise their objectivity. Mercury is a very objective planet, but Moon is a subjective planet. It's the planet of our mindset and our ego consciousness, our idea of separate existence. So even though this helps the Moon be very adaptable and easygoing, it can hurt the Mercury capabilities of objectivity a little bit. They can sometimes talk themselves into things, rationalize things, and tell themselves what they want to believe rather than seeing things very clearly. They can sometimes hurt people's feelings unintentionally. So this is not because they want to be cruel, not at all. As we said, they're very easygoing people, typically very friendly. They like to be on good terms with people. But because they have a very quick wit, quick mind, Gemini is a masculine air sign, so it's all about proactive communication, being quick to react to things. And as we already discussed, they're not really emotionally profound. They are a little bit more keeping things on the surface. So because they find it hard to be hurt by other people, their feelings are not so easily hurt. They also sometimes can't realize that other people might be a little bit more vulnerable and sensitive emotionally than they are. Some people have thinner skin, and so with this kind of quick wit, they can sometimes not be the most diplomatic. They can say things just because they think it's funny or witty, forgetting to use diplomacy and tact in a particular situation. And since they don't take things too personally, they assume that others are like that as well, because Mercury is a very impersonal planet. They can unwittingly hurt or insult people who are more sensitive, though they rarely intend actual harm. They're not really those people that hold a grudge or anything like that. Their quick wit can hurt more sensitive people before they actually realize that they've done anything to hurt them. They also may get bored easily without sufficient variety and intellectual challenge. They need constant change and movement in their lives. They're ruled by the air element, which is about movement and change and communication. And so if their life isn't really changing or moving frequently enough, or if they don't have a lot of moving parts and communication with different people in their day-to-day life, they can feel a little bit stagnant, feel low in their mood, without novelty, without intellectual engagement especially, and variety. They may feel trapped or unfulfilled. They can become depressed if their life becomes too static or unchanging. And finally, one potential area of difficulty with displacement is the struggle with intense, intimate emotional depth and proneness to superficiality in communicating and relating with other people. So as we said, their preference is for lightness, for variety, for casual connections, and that can sometimes lead to a little bit superficial relationships and interactions. Maybe they have a very wide circle of acquaintances and friends, but people that can really confide in them and vice versa, people that are really there for them when they really need them through thick and thin, calling a person and they catch the first plane to go on the other side of the world for you because you have that very profound emotional connection. This can be a little bit of a challenge for them to develop on such a deep level. So they may avoid going deep or exploring meaningful topics if they seem too intense and heavy, because it's a little bit scary for them to go into these very, very deep waters. It's not a comfort zone for them. Air is about lightness and water is about depth, like Mercury is debilitated in the sign of Pisces, and Pisces symbolizes the deep, Pisces rules the ocean, which symbolizes deep emotions, deep emotional undercurrents, and Mercury struggles in those very profound emotional waters. So displacement is not the most harmonious for those seeking very exclusive, deeply intimate, intensely loyal, long-term partnership, which is not to say that they're not great at relationships. I think they're a great placement for relationships, as I said, they're very, very suited for pairing up with others. It's just that they like to keep things on a more intellectual level, more cerebral. They don't like to go very, very intense, very, very sentimental with people. That's just not their frequency, really. Moving on to Moon in Cancer, what can we say about the unique traits, strengths, and qualities of a person who has the Moon placed in the sign of Cancer in their birth chart? First of all, here Moon is in its own sign, and so people with this placement fundamentally understand the importance of their emotional well-being for everything else in their life. So, Moon is very, very comfortable in the sign of Cancer as it rules it. And this is a feminine sign. It prioritizes feeling well before it can perform well out in the world as well. And so people who have Moon in Cancer really understand that it's important for them to feel safe, to feel emotionally fulfilled in order to function best as a human being. So this is an innate understanding of the importance of prioritizing our psychological and emotional well-being. So they wouldn't stay stuck in situations that make them feel bad for too long. They will change and adapt to whatever is needed to make them happy long term. On the other hand, they have very strong innate wisdom about the human emotional needs. So they possess an inherent understanding of what emotionally sustains people. This wisdom is not so much learned as intuitive, because Cancer, as all water signs, is guided by intuition. They simply know things because they know them. And this allows them to sense what others need emotionally and to recognize their own emotional requirements as well, without needing external validation, explanation, or rational proof. They simply know things and they act accordingly, guided by their inner wisdom about the emotional world of human beings. So as a water sign, Moon in Cancer is feeling centered, and they intuitively understand the truth without needing rationalization or logic. They can read between the lines. They possess an innate wisdom about what is real and what is true. So Moon in Cancer people are very intuitive, very psychic. This can of course be a double-edged sword, but it is a bit of a superpower in itself. So they sense things psychically and are exceptionally attuned to the consciousness and vibrations of their environment. They feel everything: the emotional temperature of a room, the energy of the people around them, the atmosphere of their home. Any toxic or negative energy affects them deeply and cannot be hidden from them. So this is not someone that you can fool. They can sense how you feel about them. If they're with a partner and their partner is kind of hiding their true intentions, their true feelings, water signs, but especially Moon in Cancer, is very good at kind of just simply sensing the temperature, the emotional temperature of everyone in their vicinity, especially the intimate partners who they're very attuned with. People with the Moon in Cancer have a very strong magnetic and nurturing aura. This is really the sign of motherhood, of mother's love and tenderness towards a child. And so there is a lot of nourishment, a lot of nurturing energy here, a lot of motherly tenderness and qualities. And so this makes them very good nurturers, but it also makes them very endearing to other people. Moon is the planet with which we best connect very intimately with other people. And so when people have strong Cancer in their chart or very strong Moon in their chart, other people find them endearing, find them gentle, and they want to be kind to them and take care of them. The Moon is a luminary. Together with the Sun, they're the two luminaries in the sky. And even though the Sun shines brighter and everyone can see the Sun's light, and the Sun's light is very important to existence on Earth, at the same time, prolonged exposure leads to burn. That's why even though the Sun is associated with very kind of charismatic energy, with strong self-expression, with strong leadership qualities and intelligence, divine intelligence, at the same time, it's a cruel planet in Vedic astrology, whereas the Moon is a gentle planet. It enables plant growth and it lights the sky in the darkest moments at night. It helps us see our way through the night, and the night is a symbol here for our inner mind, our subconscious world. And so the Moon is a gentle planet. Its light never harms us, only helps us, and it provides nurturing in those very innermost intimate moments that not everyone sees us in this light. This is a very vulnerable time. For example, at night we feel more tender, we feel more vulnerable, and sometimes a little bit more moody, just like the Moon is very changeable and fickle and moody as well. And so people with the Moon in Cancer have a very safe, very warm and inviting energy. They're naturally drawing others towards them. And while the Sun, the solar energy, is charismatic, it's outward focused, the moon is more introverted and it's just magnetic. It draws people towards them, and they create a sense of emotional safety both for themselves and for those in their environment. Another unique quality of the moon in Cancer is that people with displacement intuitively understand the need to protect their inner world from others. As you probably know, Cancer is depicted in astrology as the crab, and there is a sense of kind of an outer protective shell hiding a very vulnerable core. And so people with displacement protect their inner world from others. They don't really reveal their true moods, their true feelings and motivations, and they only allow you to enter into their innermost vulnerable world if they feel that they can trust you, if they feel that you're close and safe. And so a lot of their inner workings actually remain hidden and invisible to others, which is their instinctive protection mechanism. They also need a lot of time to process their emotions. And so, symbolically, that is the home. That's why Cancer rules the home environment, and it's the fourth house, the fourth sign, which is the most hidden environment. And so even though Cancer can create this kind of cozy environment, not everyone is welcome in this environment, and that's what makes it safe, because it's kind of protected and it's very exclusive. People with moon in Cancer have strong manifesting powers through emotional focus. So just like the moon controls the tides and enables plant growth, people with displacement have strong powers of manifesting their thoughts and desires, enabling things to really grow naturally through kind of unseen and inexplicable ways. They can get their wishes fulfilled simply by focusing on them with emotional charge and intention. And they can also be very, very perceptive. They can, as we said, there is strong psychic energy here. We don't really fully understand it. It's the earth signs that are, guided by logic, and the air signs guided by communication and rationality. The water signs are the most mysterious ones. They rule the 4th, 8th, and 12th houses, which are very mysterious, very occult houses. And it's kind of the power of the mind, which we haven't really as human beings fully taken full advantage of yet. But if you have strong planets in the water signs, you have access to this manifesting power a little bit more than other people, and you're more psychically attuned. At the same time, people with moon in Cancer are naturally adept at forming deep, profound emotional bonds. They're very skilled at creating strong emotional connections with whoever they deem worthy. And they have the ability to truly listen to people, to really be perceptive, not only of what you say, but how you say it, the emotion that you put into your words. And they kind of understand people on a deep level. They empathize, and this allows them to forge like very intimate relationships of great depth and meaning. They intuitively know how to make others feel seen and understood as well. So what are the core emotional needs of people who have moon in the sign of Cancer? First and foremost, they need emotional acceptance and unconditional love. As we mentioned already, Cancer is the ultimate sign of motherhood. And in the best case scenario, unless there are afflictions and, toxic patterns in a person's chart, a mother's love is supposed to be fully unconditional, all-encompassing, no questions asked, And so people with displacement need to feel accepted and loved simply for who they are, their essence, their nature, their sensitive heart. And they need partners who understand and accept their moodiness and changeability as well. Moon is constantly changing, either waning or waxing, but that represents also the fickleness of our mind and emotion. And so people with displacement are often quite fickle emotionally. They can go in and out of moods fairly rapidly and sometimes inexplicably. And so they need from their partners, especially, unconditional love, reassurance during their low, moody periods as well. And they need partners who are familiar with the fact that, with the right love, support, and care, people with moon in Cancer can actually be shifted into better moods very easily. They just need to feel supported and genuinely cared for. On the other hand, they also need acceptance for who they are, not what they do. As the most feminine and receptive planet, moon in Cancer feels happiest when accepted and loved simply for being who they are, rather than for their accomplishments or actions. So as opposed to more kind of masculine signs that need acknowledgement of their efforts, their actions, their achievements, and courage, moon in Cancer people prefer to just be loved as they are without any connection to their actions out in the world. They need to be cherished for their essence and inner being, not valued based on their productivity, what they own, what they look like, or what they've achieved in the world. Moon in Cancer people also need the opportunity to nurture others and to help them grow through love. This is proper like motherly energy, right? So the fundamental drive here is to become the ideal embodiment of motherhood. This manifests as a powerful urge to nurture others, to help them grow through love. Of course, this is talking about their inner circle of people that they genuinely care about, so they can create safe, cozy spaces where everyone feels loved, understood, seen, and taken care of. And remember that water signs are Brahman signs in Vedic astrology. Brahman signs means wise ones. So there is wisdom there, and they like to feel that they're being appreciated for their inner wisdom, especially their psychological and emotional wisdom. So fulfilling their nurturing purpose is really essential for their contentment. So they like to feel unconditionally loved, and they like to have an outlet of expression for this gentle energy that they have to nurture others through thick and thin. They also need a comfortable, cozy space that they can call home, a home that really feels like a sanctuary for them. So they have a high capacity to provide a comfortable space and turn their home into a sanctuary. Their home is an extension of their emotional state and an expression of their love. And so they need a home that is clean, aesthetically pleasing, filled with positive energy. They're often really good cooks as well, or at least they really enjoy tasty food, and they can express their love through feeding people. And their home has to be a refuge from the external world where they feel protected and emotionally held, just like a crab needs its shell, and they can hide in that shell anytime they feel threatened. Moon in Cancer people really need a home environment where they can completely relax, completely be themselves, and process their kind of complex emotions. They also have the need for people who cherish them, who speak kindly and empathetically to them. So kindness, empathy, sensitivity from others are super important. That's why they have this kind of protective shell, so that they can really filter through those that they really want to allow in their home environment, because as soon as they let you into that inner circle, they can become very vulnerable and very sensitive to how you speak to them and how you act towards them. They need to be surrounded by people who cherish them, who are sensitive to their personality and their needs. They require communication and interactions characterized by kindness, gentleness, and empathy. They don't like cruelty, they don't like directness, they don't like harsh words or criticism or insensitivity, because that deeply affects them and can destabilize their emotional state for prolonged periods of time. One very important need for the Moon in Cancer is they need to be free from any kind of toxic or negative energy. Anything that is kind of very negative in their environment, especially at home, will be deeply felt and will negatively affect them. They need to be surrounded by people and spaces with positive, loving vibrations, because they psychically sense their environment. They're emotional, psychic sponges, and they're acutely aware of any negative energy. So they cannot simply ignore, brush it aside, or pretend it doesn't exist. It has to be addressed. So it's better if they avoid any kind of signs of toxicity and heavy drama from people in their intimate circle. And finally, they need a lot of time alone to process their emotions. They need adequate time to recuperate, to be alone with their thoughts and feelings. All the water signs are kind of introverted. They need time to process their emotions, to regenerate. And they're so receptive and psychic that they absorb other people's emotions very easily. So they need time to separate their own feelings from the feelings that they've kind of caught from the environment. And so being introverted in that way, they need regular time away from social demands to recharge and reconnect to themselves. Even if other placement in the chart indicate that this is an outgoing person, extroverted person, if they have Moon in Cancer, they need a lot of rest. They need to be alone with their thoughts so that they can really be clear about what emotions and psychological phenomena are inner workings and what is coming from their environment. As with every moon sign placement, Moon in Cancer also has its shadow side and potential challenging areas as well. So let's go through that so that people can be better equipped and be aware of that, so they can work productively with those traits. And so first of all, one potential shadow side of Moon in Cancer is their emotional oversensitivity and moodiness. This is something that Cancer as a sign is very well known for. The moon is very sensitive. It's actually described in Vedic astrology as lovesick. So it needs love, it craves connection. And this is their nature. So people with displacement may be a bit too sensitive to their environment, a bit too moody and changeable emotionally. The world often does not readily provide the safety and comfort that they crave, leading to profound discontentment. And so they can become a bit too dependent on their environment being perfect, their loved ones being perfectly attuned, sinking into low moods and despair when reality doesn't match these needs. So because this is a Brahman sign, wisdom and spirituality, a connection to something divine, something bigger than themselves, something bigger than humanity, is ideal here, because humans will always let us down a little bit. Reality, especially material reality, will always fall short of what we're expecting it to be and how we're expecting it to fulfill us. And so especially for water signs, it's very important to connect to something spiritual, to something, some kind of cause, some belief, some group or belonging, sense of belonging to something that is bigger than themselves, so that if they are faced with the harsher realities of life, if they feel that somehow their environment isn't providing them with the nourishment that they crave, the unconditional love that they crave, they can, rest safe assured that God or whatever universal power they believe in is loving them unconditionally. So this is something that they can nurture for those periods when they feel a little bit low, a little bit unloved. Another potential challenging aspect of displacement is absorbing the emotions and problems of those around them. So being so psychically attuned and receptive as they are, they can absorb the emotions and problems of those around them, any kind of heaviness they can feel, and they can take on burdens that aren't really theirs to carry, and they can become emotionally drained through that. So their nurturing nature and desire to help can lead them to take on other people's problems, emotions, and that can be at the expense of their own well-being. So they may not know when to say no. They can exhaust themselves by overgiving to others. I've known of people with displacement who are in kind of toxic dynamics in their relationship, and the person that they love is very unstable. And so on the one hand, they love them unconditionally, so they're constantly with them and unable to let go of them. At the same time, this toxicity, this constant drama is really exhausting for them emotionally. Another potential challenging aspect with displacement is the tendency to hold on to the past too long. So clinging to memories, to hurts, to past emotional goals or past relationships. So their tenacity can be a strength, and we're saying tenacity because Cancer is represented by the crab, which, with its multiple legs can attach itself to different surfaces and hold on for dear life. So this kind of tenacity to withstand pain and pressure can be a strength, but it can also become destructive for them because they can cling to memories and hurts to their own detriment. Once they get their claws into something, they hold on even when it's unhealthy or when it's necessary to finally release it. So they can hold on to emotions and memories for a lifetime, replaying past hurts, struggling to forgive, moving forward. And so their emotional attachment to people and situations can make them resistant to necessary endings, to breakups or major life changes. So embracing change can be really, really important for them, and not just on the physical level, but emotionally learning how to let go will be very, very important. And because it's very common with, people with the Cancer placement to break up with someone, but still, reminisce about them and be nostalgic about that relationship years down the road. And finally, prioritizing feelings over logic and rationality can be a little bit of a downside with displacement, because this can interfere with effective problem solving in life. So Mars represents logical problem solving in astrology and taking decisive action. Mars is our planet of will, our ability to deal with difficult things, and Mars is debilitated in the sign of Cancer. So hyper-focusing and obsessing over problems doesn't really work well for people with displacement. They can ruminate without reaching solutions. So rigid logic here doesn't really resonate with Moon and Cancer people, because they care more about how things make them feel rather than what's right or what's logical. This is why Mars is debilitated here, because imagine a warrior or a general that is constantly hyper aware of their emotions and being guided by their emotions. They would inevitably lose the battle, right? So while this sensitivity is beautiful, it can prevent them from making rational decisions when it's needed in life. So a core challenge here is that their life and well-being are highly dependent upon their mental attitude. Moon is the mind. And so if their mindset becomes overly negative, their entire experience becomes negative. So really learning how to manage their own emotions is a key skill for Moon and Cancer people. Now let's look at the unique traits and strengths and qualities of Moon in the sign of Leo. So first of all, people with the Moon in Leo tend to be emotionally guided by inspiration and intuition. Fire sign natives in general like to live with a sense of passion and inspiration, and they allow their intuition to guide them towards what they deem truthful, noble, and worthy for themselves. They're emotionally motivated by inspiration, the desire for self-expression, rather than fear or simple passions. They just know things intuitively without needing rational perception. So they're very intuitive sign, and it's very important for them to pursue things that are authentic to them and that they deem to be the right thing, the noble thing to do. Moon and Leo people tend to have a secure, stable sense of self. They tend to be authentic, individualistic, and quite unapologetic about who they are at heart. And so the combination of fire element here and fixed modality in Leo produces a secure self, a stable sense of self. They are secure about who they are and what they need to feel happy. They don't allow others to tell them how things should be or what should make them happy, how they should feel about things. They're very authentic, very individualistic, and not overly concerned with other people's opinions. They tend to be noble and dignified people. They have high standards of themselves and others. And so since the moon here is in the sign of the king, Leo, their general attitude and self-image is noble and dignified, unless there are afflictions in the chart, of course. They tend to be motivated by the idea that greatness exists, good things exist, and we should strive towards beautiful, elevated possibilities in life. So this is a very optimistic, very inspirational type of placement. There is an element also of sacrifice here, because kings and queens are rewarded for the burdens that they carry, the responsibilities they have to fulfill as head of state. And so they're expected to always act according to their very high standards. So they're capable of sacrificing their lower, kind of more unimportant needs, passions, and interests for the sake of something more noble that they deem more worthy in their life. In terms of personality, Moon and Leo people tend to have a sunny, larger-than-life, charismatic personality. They possess a magnetic aura and a large personality that can fill a room when they enter it. They may have a very sunny personality as well, able to make others laugh, to feel special simply for being loved by them. So they can create this kind of spotlight effect on people who they love, and they can shower them with so much charm and laughter and humor and affection that people really feel special in their presence. And Moon and Leo people presence tends to feel warm and luminous as well. We can't really describe Moon in Leo without mentioning pride. For them, pride is an emotional necessity. It's a big component when we talk about the Moon in Leo, because if they're not proud of their life, of their deeds, of what they're creating or what they have created, they can feel very down on themselves, very depressed. And this is really what they need emotionally for a sense of fulfillment. Pride in their accomplishments, the life that they're building is very fundamental to their emotional well-being. They tend to have a strong sense of responsibility and capability as well. Leo carries kind of fatherly energy, just like Cancer carries motherly energy. And so they rely on their own strength to provide for the physical and emotional needs in life, both for themselves and other people in their care. And as a quadruped sign, they can bear great emotional pressure and carry heavy burdens in life. They have the stability to drag their kingdom and family up the hill if necessary. Again, this is the king energy. They can really bear the burden of responsibility, and they like to make sure that everyone around them is safe and secure, and they sometimes put the needs of others above their own needs, which is, I know, contrary to the mainstream popular view of Leo as being an egotistical sign. This can only happen if there are afflictions in the chart. They also intuitively realize that they can gain authority and respect simply by being consistent through time, being loyally devoted to one thing consistently, because again, this is a fixed sign. They tend to be described by natural leadership qualities and authority in their private life, because the moon is more our inner world. So you might actually not notice it very much about them. Sun and Leo people have a more extroverted personality. Moon in Leo expresses itself differently. It's more about being the king in the emotional, in their private life. And so this kind of natural authority and leadership is more felt by their intimate partners, for example. They tend to lead by example. Their partners love them in part because of profound respect for how they choose to live their lives with intention, nobility, ideals, and courage. And because both Leo and Moon are sattvic in nature, they possess a highly egalitarian desire to serve people through compassionate leadership. So both the Sun and the Moon, again, they have this kind of royal qualities of wanting to take care of those who are, for example, metaphorically weaker than them, or just basically anyone that they feel responsible for. They don't want to be cruel. On the contrary, they want to really be gentle with everyone within their care. And they find the highest satisfaction when they devote their abilities to a kingdom that can be any kind of path in life, solely focused on the well-being of the people that they feel responsible. So, for example, if they have a massage parlor, it really makes them emotionally fulfilled to be fully devoted to their service. They really want to put their clients' well-being first, and they will go through to great lengths, sacrificing of their personal life just for the sake of fulfilling their duties and responsibilities. And so they tend to be highly protective of what they consider theirs. Of course, Leo is very territorial, right? So just like a lion protects its territory, they're very protective of their domain in life. And again, this can be anything depending on your unique path in life. Their position in the world and their area of devotion and creativity, something very sacred for them, something they take very seriously, and they take pride in what they have built throughout their life. They have a kshatriya energy, which is warrior energy, which means that they're willing to fight and overcome obstacles for the sake of their individuality, creativity, and for those that they care about the most. So what about the core emotional needs of people with their moon in the sign of Leo? First of all, they need to feel that their uniqueness, individuality, and efforts are admired and respected by others. They need to feel recognized as special, celebrated for who they are. Compliments, praise, admiration, gratitude are essential emotional nourishment. But even more so, they need that from themselves. So even if other people give them compliments and praise, if they internally feel that they have fallen from their standards, from their ideas of worthiness and nobility, they can still feel very depressed. So external praise is important, but I would say internally feeling proud of themselves is all the more important. They have a profound need to be recognized as unique, as special, acknowledged for their contributions, worth, and impact by those that they love, because they pour a lot of effort, a lot of energy into whatever they're passionate about. They make a lot of sacrifices. So it feels really nourishing for them to feel seen and recognized for everything that they've contributed. So their efforts, achievements, and contributions ideally should be acknowledged and appreciated. And they very much dislike ingratitude and unappreciation when they really feel that they've done their best for someone else. Another core need for people with their moon in Leo is to create a life that feels authentic, genuine to them, a path that is really reflective of their identity and core ideals. So a person with the moon here is emotionally motivated to create a world or kingdom, a life path basically, that serves as a direct reflection of who they are as a person. They need the freedom to be fully themselves, to express their individuality, to pursue their chosen path without judgment or interference from other people. It's a very individualistic sign. They need room to create, to build, to establish their path, any kind of domain that they've decided to devote themselves to according to their own vision and values. So this can't really be impacted from the outside. And they also need to feel proud of their actions, their impact and achievements of the life that they're building. They need to be aligned in terms of values and sense of greater purpose. And because this is a male sign, they feel good when they're satisfied and proud of their own actions. So actions come first, and then comes the emotional fulfillment from being proud of your actions in the world. Even in the best of circumstances, they may feel low due to their own perception of their position in society, their actions and achievements. So for example, if they feel that they should be here, but they're here, there is kind of an inner dissatisfaction there. They need to feel proud of what they're creating. This is essential for them. Again, alignment between their values, purpose, and actions is really, really important. This is a sattvic sign. It's a fire sign, so it needs to be genuine. It needs to be authentic. Both the moon and Leo are sattvic signs, so there's a lot of congruence here. and their emotional needs have to be aligned with their values, basically. They need to feel that they're doing good in the world, co-creating some kind of better future in their own unique way. That is what truly makes them happy. Also, they need a sense of contribution, of responsibility, ownership, and purpose. They won't be content with a life that feels kind of mediocre, lazy, or simply surviving on the material level, something that just pays the bills. Usually it's not going to be satisfactory for them. It's a very ambitious placement all in all. And so both the luminaries, moon and sun together, create a personality here that wants to be known and seen for something, their chosen domain of expertise and contribution. So they want to kind of create some kind of a legacy for themselves, something they can be proud of. They need a meaningful purpose, not mere survival. Survival is more Saturn, which is sitting opposite of Leo. And they need to feel in charge of their life, of their destiny, their path. You know, it's the king archetype. It doesn't like to follow other orders. It likes to give orders. Another core need is of compliments, praise, and gratitude from people that they care about, appreciation and recognition for their efforts, ideally adoration, because we're talking about moon here. So it very much impacts the intimate relationships. It's very hard for a person with moon in Leo to be okay with a relationship where they don't feel respected by their partner, adored even, really, really loved. And this has to be kind of consistent because it's a fixed sign. So none of this kind of wishy-washy energy from their partner. They need to feel that they're constantly being loved and appreciated by their intimate partner. And they need to feel that their uniqueness and self-expression is admired. Any kind of compliments, praise, gratitude goes a long way. Laughing at their jokes, showing that you really, appreciate having them in your life is really important. Consistently showing them that they're special for you, valued. This is fundamental for their emotional well-being. Just like food and shelter is for a human being. So is kind of a sense of appreciation by their partner in intimate relationships for Moon and Leo. Without these, they will feel unloved, unappreciated, taken for granted. They also need loyalty and genuine respect. So they need partners who respect them deeply, not just tolerate them, but genuinely respect their choices, values, the way they choose to live their lives with intention and nobility. They like to feel respected. They like to feel proud of themselves, and they are usually proud of themselves because they adhere to very rigid standards that they have placed for themselves. And so the partner equally has to be proud of them. And they're very loyal to those that they care about. They show their loyalty in the actions they take to protect and serve those that they love and who love them back. They can't really be with partners who don't respect them and their efforts. And finally, they need autonomy and freedom of self-expression and actions. They cannot be really bossed around, and they can't live in someone else's shadow, play by other people's rules. They need to feel in charge of their intimate relationship and take it as an offense when others try to tell them what to do or how to do things best. They're best suited to a partner who allows their ambitions and personality to take center stage. A partner who allows them a high level of autonomy, of self-expression and action. So very controlling partners would not be suitable for them. And they need to be the main character, directing their own story, also in relationships as well. So what are the potential shadow sides and challenges that comes with this placement for Moon in Leo? First of all, they tend to be quite fixed in their ways, and there can be some emotional rigidity there. The Moon is inherently changeable and perceptive, but in Leo it seeks to maintain an established world or kingdom rather than constantly moving to something new. So this fixed quality can prevent them from adapting when change is necessary or beneficial. Of course, ideally, they would sense what needs to be adapted and simply implemented for the better functioning of their chosen domain, of their chosen career. Being slow to change or rigid emotionally can mean that they can get stuck in unhelpful emotional patterns, stories, resentments without the flexibility to shift their perspective. So they can hold grudges and they can just kind of get stuck in emotional states for a bit too long than is healthy or necessary. They also prefer to initiate and give, and it's harder for them to be receptive, which can be a bit of a painful position because the Moon, as we said, is the most feminine planet and it's a very receptive planet. And so the fixed masculine nature of Leo, Leo, the king archetype, the person who provides for others, who takes care of others, it can really prevent them from receiving things from the environment that could make them happier, more relaxed, and safe. So their self-reliance, the need to be the strong one in relationships, can really prevent them from allowing others to help and support them and nurture them. And this can kind of isolate them from genuine connection, because genuine bonds are formed when there is a give and take. If everything is kind of one directional, there's just not the same level of intimacy there. So being open and receptive to care, to taking in other people's opinions and taking other people's feelings on board is really important in relationships. So this can be a bit of a challenging placement there, because Leo is a bit of a rigid, royal kind of fixed energy. Another potential shadow side is that they feel their happiness needs to be earned. Their inner contentment is dependent on their actions. And so they feel that they need to earn their happiness and are quite rigid in their sense of identity and environment. So that prevents them from realizing that happiness is simply a state of mind, a state of feeling, rather than the product of one's action. So it's something that can just be received, not something that has to be achieved and fought for. And so their emotional well-being is directly tied to their perception of their own worth and accomplishment. Sometimes, they can have all the conditions for being happy. They can be in a position where other people would love to be in. But if they internally feel that they don't deserve it, if they feel that they haven't earned to relax and be happy, they won't be. They will be on edge. So that can be a bit of a painful position for the moon. Their need for recognition and validation can also be a little bit challenging, because if they don't receive the appropriate, as they believe it to be, admiration and appreciation relative to the efforts that they've put in, they can feel deeply unhappy and lose their ability to love the person who doesn't value them. So without regular acknowledgement, they can sink into low moods. The lack of recognition can be emotionally devastating for them. And again, we're talking about the moon here. So it doesn't have to be really from colleagues, from bosses, from the outer world. It's more about their intimate partner. It's really important for them to have a partner who cherishes them, who shows them unconditional love, and who really shows their respect and appreciation on a regular basis. Otherwise, they can really fall out of love because the pain is just too strong for them to bear. And so, this lack of recognition can be emotionally painful for them, and they can sometimes become dependent on external validations and compliments to feel good about themselves. This is the shadow side of any kind of Leo placement, really. Another potential downside of this placement is that they can act a little bit too dramatically, both act and react. So among their loved ones, they can feel fully safe to express themselves authentically. And they can be very theatrical, very colorful in their expression, very passionate and with like a flair for the dramatic. And when they're not receiving the attention and adoration that they crave, they may unconsciously use more drama to demand, people to notice them. So for example, if their partner upsets them a little bit and it's something very small, they can kind of blow it a little bit out of proportion just for the sake of drama, just because their self-expression is such a strong trait of theirs, and they can be a little bit overly dramatic sometimes in their relationships. Another potential problematic area is their sense of self-importance. And so if they don't have a healthy self-esteem, they can be a little bit arrogant. They can pretend to be more important than how they actually feel inside, which can, it can lead to compensations for inner lacks, basically. So they can interpret any disagreement, any criticism, or lack of attention as a personal affront to their dignity and worth, leading to hurt feelings and damaged relationships. So, when there is too much ego involved, when there is compensatory tactics, this can really damage relationships. Another quality of theirs that can be sometimes potentially challenging is the pride that we already discussed. So they can be too prideful. They can struggle with accepting criticism in a balanced way. They can take things a bit too personally. So their fixed nature and pride can make it very difficult to accept feedback from other people. And they can perceive that as a lack of love, lack of respect. Their strong pride can prevent them from admitting mistakes, asking for help, or showing vulnerability as well. So they may over-identify with what they've already built, their territory, their role in society, making it difficult to adapt when circumstances change. And finally, their self-reliance and their need to project strength can prevent others from wanting to help them. So they really have this aura of, I got it all figured out. Don't tell me what to do. I'm very strong. I'm very confident in myself. And so this kind of reliance on their own strength, their need to always appear like the strong one, can be an obstacle in relationships, because they may need to feel in charge to the point of being controlling or domineering in relationships, fearing to let go of control. And also their need for autonomy can override other people's boundaries and needs, and they may struggle with releasing control when it's time to do so. But more than anything else, as we said, intimate relationships are formed when there is mutual vulnerability and both people can accept from one another. And this kind of need to always be the provider, to always be the strong one, to always be the confident, secure one that knows what they're doing, prevents them from showing their vulnerable side, from admitting that they're feeling low, that they're feeling weak, that they're needing of reassurance and help from other people. And so other people may not notice that they genuinely might need help. And, not only do they prevent this kind of vulnerable moment from connecting with those that they love and allowing people to help them and to bond with them, but also they can feel a little bit resentment afterwards because they needed help and nobody was there to offer them help. So this pride can really get in the way of strong personal connections, unfortunately. So what are the unique traits, qualities, and strengths of people who have the moon placed in the sign of Virgo? First of all, they have a need to fix and optimize for inner peace. As a Mercury-ruled tamasic earth sign, Moon in Virgo sees the world as a source of never-ending problems and inefficiencies that need to be fixed and optimized for inner peace, because Moon is our inner world and Virgo is the very fixer-upper kind of energy. So they're emotionally attached to self-improvement, improvement of their environment, especially their loved ones. So Mercury is the planet of progress, identifying problems and inefficiencies and fixing them through intelligence, craftiness, skills, communication, and cooperation. So this is why this blend is so conducive to improvement and wanting to fix things. People with the moon in Virgo tend to be rationally centered and logic-driven. As all earth signs, Virgo is rationally centered, helping the mind arrive at conclusions through logic and sound judgment. They simply know things through what can be physically perceived, things that can be tasted, touched, proven through solid results, and so they rely on knowledge and analytical intelligence rather than pure intuition. Another trait of Moon in Virgo is, of course, their perfectionism and their attention to detail. So they continuously strive for optimization. They like to fix things, to improve things in systems, and also to improve people in their lives, because we're talking about the moon here. So a lot of what we discuss is very much targeted towards intimate relationships. So their attention to detail is exceptional. They tend to always strive to look very polished, to behave in a very polished way. They're driven to develop their own intelligence, skills, and knowledge in many different practical areas. They like to feel capable. They also have the ability to see situations very objectively with an open mind and a very curious approach, because Mercury is a very curious, open-minded, unbiased planet. One of their strongest suits is the ability to see things objectively with meticulousness and the observation and lack of prejudice of a scientist. They approach each situation individually with a very innocent, open-minded, and rational mind. They are not particularly biased. They don't have really strong opinions one way or another, so that really allows them to see things very clearly. So they can observe patterns and important details in situations long before anyone else does. They create very undistorted, highly detailed impressions of every experience. They can remember things clearly as well, because moon is our memory and our imagination. And so in the sign of Virgo, it can be very meticulous, very, very, very optimized. They can have strong organizational and commercial abilities, because both the moon and Mercury are Vaishya planet and sign. Vaishya is the caste of merchants, of artisans. So this placement is very helpful for any kind of project management activity, business activity. Mercury is the great manifestor in astrology, helping them successfully bring their thoughts and ideas into concrete realization. Even though we're talking about the moon here, so this is not so much applying to careers, but they can be very organized in their personal life, very good at organizing the lives of people they care about in their friend group, for example. They just have excellent organization abilities, and they easily assess pros and cons of every option, and they can work out great deals as well. The Virgo here encourages the moon to develop practical skills, resources, making them excellent at commerce, logistics, and creating efficient systems in general. Moon and Virgo people can be very friendly, very cooperative, and quick-witted, very helpful people. Mercury, as we said, is very much about our quick wit, our sense of humor, our friendliness. So because Mercury is associated with friendship and communication, this can help people with Moon in Virgo have a very friendly, cooperative, easygoing, and open-minded nature. They're truly approaching their environment with an open, exploratory, and investigative mind. They really want to get to the bottom of things very objectively. Even though Virgo energy is known as the criticizing, kind of perfectionistic energy, actually people with this placement can be very gentle and very caring beneath the critique. They're simply looking for the better solution for everyone's sake, especially when they love someone. They're very committed to improving their lives. And so even though their judgmental and critical nature is quite apparent, simply because they pay so much attention to details and they really want to optimize everything in life, this kind of attention to detail and critique arises not from rigid ideas of what is right and what is wrong. This is more of a martial qualities of fighting for what's right or being radical in people's opinions. Rather, it comes from recognizing that there are better, easier, more efficient, smarter ways to do things. And in their natural state, Moon and Virgo people can be very idealistic and very careful and caring people. Their empathy for the underdog, wanting to be of practical service to others, represents their highest level of expression. So when they try to fix you, when they try to, point out something that can be improved upon, try not to take it too personally. They're not doing it of malice because they want to make you feel uncomfortable or because they don't want to appreciate you. It's simply out of love. They express their love through this continuous improvement of wanting to show you easier, better ways to do things because they love to improve their lives. And so they believe that everyone else is equally as committed to self-improvement as them. That's why they point out flaws in things. And finally, they show affection through practical help. This is an earth sign. So they express their affection by helping loved ones solve problems through better planning, especially, and data processing. So if a loved one is overwhelmed by choices, they can really reach out to them, help them narrow down the options using clever analysis, rigorous pros and cons list. As an earth sign, Moon and Virgo people love to both give and receive practical help and tangible kind of practical helpful gifts. They bond through practical collaboration and shared commitment to making life work more efficiently. So basically partnering with people to solve problems and to improve systems is their kind of modus operandi. So what about the core emotional needs of Moon and Virgo people? First of all, they need partners who share their commitment to self-improvement and problem solving. It can be very painful for them to witness an unwillingness or inability of their loved ones to deal with problems in their life and not work kind of towards self-improvement. So this can really hurt them because, as I said, they can be very gentle, very caring people. They really want to offer practical help. And when they see that you're struggling with something in your life but are unwilling to resolve it, that can create a lot of inner tension for them, believe it or not. So they need partners who share their commitment to growth and optimization, partners who are willing to actively work on becoming a better version of themselves. They also bond through practical collaboration and share commitment to making life work more efficiently. So if you help them resolve a problem, they will always remember it. They thrive when they can work alongside others towards shared goals of improvement and efficiency. Practical collaboration on meaningful projects strengthens their emotional bonds with others. So they really bond through solving problems. It's a Tamasic sign. Tamasic signs look for problems in life in order to minimize hardship and to avoid more serious problems and avoid dangers in the future. So they really express their love and they bond with people through solving something. It can be through work, through sacrifice towards a cause, through helping those in need, or simply helping each other have a more smoothly flowing, better flowing, more practical and efficient life. They have a strong need to feel that they're managing their life well, because they have this kind of inner belief that only those who effectively and efficiently manage their own lives deserve to be happy. They feel most worthy of love and self-satisfaction when they feel that their life is pure, when it's been sort of perfected and streamlined. They like to follow a very meticulous laid out plan for themselves, and their sense of self-worth is deeply tied to how well organized and optimized their life feels. They also need to feel useful. They need to feel productive, utilizing their many skills and talents, helping improve people and systems. They're ruled by Mercury, which automatically means they're very cerebral, very smart, and very analytical, and they also have a multitude of talents and artistic skills as well. Mercury is the craftsman and the actor, so they can wear multiple hats. And so Moon in this sign thrives when it feels useful and productive, when it can contribute meaningfully through their skills and talents. And this is essential to their emotional well-being. It's very important for them, as you can imagine, to have very orderly, organized, efficient, optimized living environments. So they need to feel safe and mentally calm, and that comes with an organized environment for them. They need their physical environment to be clean, organized, not necessarily very luxurious or very beautiful, that's more of a Venusian thing, but just optimized, something that feels functional and practical to them. And so their home and workspace should really reflect order and efficiency, supporting their sense of control and safety. They feel at their best when they feel that they've done everything within their power to create an optimized life with the least likelihood of emerging problems and inefficiencies down the line. As we said, it's a Tamasic sign. The core motivation is to avoid problems and optimize everything. They really crave practical solutions and tangible results. They need to see concrete evidence of progress and results. Intangible promises, vague plans don't really help them feel any happier or any more secure. So they thrive when everything is measurable, when they can see practical solutions that can be implemented and tracked, that they can really see the practical results from everything that they've thought about and acted upon. And they crave recognition for their efforts to improve situations, to solve problems. They like to be recognized as efficient, as having high standards, and as someone who diligently worked hard towards achieving tangible, workable results. They also need to have outlets for intellectual engagement. It's a very cerebral sign. And Mercury is the planet of analytical thinking and also communication. So they need regular opportunities to use their mind, to solve problems, to learn new skills, to read, to increase their knowledge, to analyze different situations and develop their expertise. So they need meaningful work, projects that allow them to apply their analytical and organizational skills, and ability to identify problems and fix them. That really provides them with emotional satisfaction. That's why Virgo is known as the healing sign, and Moon Mercury gives a really great healer combination because they're just very emotionally driven to solve problems, including for other people. And what is more rewarding than helping someone solve a persistent health issue? Finally, they have a strong need for space for mental clarity and reflection, because this is a feminine side. It's a little bit of an introverted sign, and Virgo is said to dwell in the mountains. The habitat of Virgo is known in Vedic astrology as the mountains. And the mountains provide a lot of solitude, clear air. They literally need to clear the air. So mental clarity is very important for them, unadulterated perspectives, pure environments, but also mountains offer a sense of perspective, right? And so climbing on that mountain really gives you a sense of perspective of priorities in your life, and you can really clear the mental chaos and confusion. And so they really need times and environments where they can escape the chaos and the noise, and they can really, clarify what it is they need to solve as a problem, how they need to align their actions for better practical results. And they also need partners and environments that value honest, objective analysis, and people who are open to improving and optimizing. People who are too stuck in their ways, people who are too obstinate, people who take things too emotionally might not be really suited for them. Every moon sign placement has its potential shadow side and potential challenges and obstacles. So let's look at what those might be for Moon and Virgo. First of all, as we know, they have a bit of a tendency to judge and criticize themselves and their loved ones. And so their partners might feel constantly judged, analyzed, criticized, like a project to be regularly worked on and improved based on their very, very high standards. And so they kind of apply this magnifying glass to themselves, to view their own flaws, to see areas of improvement in themselves and their partner especially. And this creates a constant stream of judgment and self-judgment. And so this constant analyzing and critiquing, though it's very well-intentioned, as we mentioned, they just want to improve things for the sake of having a better, more optimized life for them and their loved ones, it can sometimes deeply wound sensitive partners and loved ones who feel that they're never good enough for the moon in Virgo. So that can be one of the main obstacles to happy relationships with this placement. They can also sometimes be a bit too cerebral, easily frustrated, because Virgo is a tamasic earth sign, so it's not really a spontaneous placement. It's more a cerebral, over-analytical placement. And moon is supposed to be about flowing with life, adapting to the environment and being changeable as circumstances demand it. And so it can be a bit of a blockage to happiness here to be a little bit too over-analytical, because this can result in an uptight, cerebral, easily frustrated personality in close relationships. People with displacement can become frustrated, judgmental, when people, including themselves, don't respond to logical analysis and practical solutions. They can also misapply logic to emotional issues and suppress their intuition, over-relying on material reality. As we said, the moon is a very intuitive, watery planet, and with an earth sign that relies heavily on tangible results and logic, people with displacement can really suppress their own inner intuition. Even if they might have very strong God-given kind of intuition with them, they intentionally suppress it because they feel that only what can be observed matters. Only what can be analytically arrived at is meaningful. And so they often attempt to use meticulous, information-driven planning to solve emotional issues, which fundamentally fails because emotions are inherently spontaneous and they cannot be probed with rational analysis. And also, when it comes to relationships, we need a partner that's not simply good on paper, but sometimes that we intimately, emotionally bond with and connect with. And Moon in Virgo can sometimes fall into the habit of getting into relationships that are good on paper, that seem like they solve all their problems, that feel that they're rationally a smart choice of a partner. But ultimately, they prevent themselves from following their intuition about who they actually should be with. Mercury and the earth element react to the world in very cerebral, rational ways, but the moon is a psychic, intuitive planet, and so basically they can suppress their natural intuition because they prefer material rationality. Another potential issue is that Virgo moon people are always aiming for impossible perfection, an absence of problems, which in reality can never be arrived at in real life. They have difficulty accepting things as they are. And I think this is one of the most painful aspects of this position, just constantly seeing the flaws in everything, in themselves, in other people, aiming for a level of perfection that doesn't exist. They can create impossible standards that no one can really meet. And this perfectionism can create a lot of inner mental tension as well. This can also lead to anxiety, overanalysis, rumination. This perfectionistic nature, combined with the tendency to see potential problems and dangers in any situation, creates a potential for high levels of anxiety, self-consciousness, inability to live, simply be in the moment. And there is another element of overthinking and overanalyzing with this sign. They can spiral into analysis paralysis, weighing always the pros and cons, examining situations from every possible angle without reaching peace or resolution, because sometimes decisions have to just be a little bit more rapid, and the more we dwell on the pros and cons, sometimes the more difficult it is to arrive at a suitable conclusion. This kind of mental internal stress can even sometimes lead to health problems. There can be a bit of a mind-body stress loop with this placement because there's just so much more brain work going on. They can be prone to anxiety, to depression, to sometimes digestive disorders or allergic reaction, anything that is coming from irritation or mental burnout, because Virgo rules the intestines, and the sensitive moon may indicate a predisposition to digestive or intestinal health issues, typically caused by the over-analytical nature of Virgo and any anxiety that they cause themselves. They can also sometimes miss the forest for the trees. Jupiter signs are always opposite Mercury signs. Mercury is meticulous and detail-oriented, plays by the rules. Jupiter is more intuitive, wisdom-guided, seeing the overarching knowledge and wisdom and not focusing so much on the details. And so When we have very strong placements in Mercury signs, we can sometimes miss the forest for the trees, leading to poor long-term decision making because we rely sometimes too heavily on logic, on analysis, and we can miss signals from the environment or from other people. We can get lost in the details at the expense of the bigger picture. Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, which is Moon's own sign. So it's actually Jupiterian ways that work better with Moon placements rather than pure Mercurial ways. And so the ideal way for the Moon to perceive the world is through intuitive wisdom rather than detail-oriented intelligence. So maybe people with this placement can really learn to sometimes let go of overanalyzing and just seek to go with their intuition, with their reflective kind of wisdom and contemplation that just arrives at them through inspiration. I know that can be a bit easier said than done, but this is kind of learning from the opposite sign, right? The opposite sign of Virgo is Pisces, and Pisces is all about connecting with the divine and believing in fairy tales, believing that magic can solve problems. So a little bit of magic can go a long way with any kind of anxiousness created by displacement. And finally, there can be difficulty with emotional flow here, difficulty with spontaneity, because they're so focused on following plan, managing things, organizing things, that can prevent them from really enjoying spontaneous moments, unexpected adventures, or enjoying the delightful unpredictability of life. And so the flowing receptive nature of the Moon is a little bit constrained by Virgo's need to control, analyze, and manage everything with displacement. Moon in Libra. What are your innate qualities, strengths, and unique traits? First of all, people with displacement tend to perceive and navigate the world through weighing the pros and cons of every situation. Libra is an air sign which is intellectually centered, as all air signs are. All air signs are depicted as human avatars, which represents their progressiveness and their need for communication and intellectual stimulation. And so the mind here derives knowledge through perception, weighing the pros and cons of every situation. People with Moon in Libra are emotionally driven to evaluate worth and actively seek social fulfillment through this constant assessment of value. What is worth it? What is not worth it? So people with the Moon in Libra are very aware of the pros and cons in every relationship, in every setting, and with every opportunity. And so what they give and what they receive in return, they're very aware of that. Also, they tend to be emotionally wired for balance and fairness. We all know that they're represented as the scales, although in Vedic astrology, it's actually clear that it's a person at a bazaar, at the market, holding scales, so a person evaluating the worth and the weight of options, but the scales represents balance, right? Things have to be equal give and take. And in order to be a good merchant in a bazaar, you have to understand the value of things, and you have to, give people something proportionate to what they've given you, otherwise you're out of business. And so the Moon in Libra is focused on understanding the value and the worth of things before making decisions. And they make choices based on their own viewpoint, ultimately driven by both self-interest and the need for fairness and harmony for the sake of long-lasting working arrangement with others. Because if we only care about our own interest, we won't really have very balanced and very stable, efficient, long-term relationships with people, right? Because eventually the scales tip too much in one direction. So there has to be a fairly balanced give and take in any kind of relationship for it to work long-term. And so fairness and harmony in their dealings with others is really important for the Moon in Libra. They try to be fair and harmonious with others. They tend to be emotionally content when they feel that they're getting the best possible deal or outcome available to them. So as a movable sign, Libra is a movable masculine sign. Moon here creates a mental urge for change and movement, specifically driven by the discovery of better options. So weighing the pros and cons, if something doesn't work, we let it go. This is where Saturn is exalted. Saturn is the planet of letting go of the baggage that is weighing us down. And so here it's exalted in Libra. So Libra is very, very capable of letting go of things that no longer serve them for the sake of something that is a better opportunity after weighing the pros and cons of it. And so they're emotionally content when they feel they're getting the best possible deal or outcome that is available in the environment. And they can skillfully recognize a bargain and are knowledgeable in the give and take of social and business dealings. That's why, the seventh house and Libra represents trade, diplomacy, because it's always about seeing from the other person's point of view and coming up with a compromise that is suitable enough, let's say, to both parties. Moon in Libra people tend to have a strong affinity for recognizing value and worth, both in themselves and in things and in other people and relationships. Venus, that rules Libra, is all about evaluating the value of things. What do we derive as contentment, pleasure, and interest out of certain situations? That's why, people with Moon in Libra and Moon in Taurus tend to usually have a strong self-esteem, strong self-worth. They really understand what they bring to the table, and they have a strong ability to find the human denominator, the common ground that allows them to socialize easily with anyone that they meet. So seeing the worth of people, seeing what is worthy in society, what might be worth to other people, they can really find the common ground with other people, enabling great communication with others. They're the social butterflies of the zodiac. They're naturally perceptive of human psychology, especially concerning sexuality and the dynamics of partnerships. They're good at evaluating available options and selecting what is most likely to give a good outcome in the long term. So Venus is very much about long-term fulfillment, long-term good deals, not something that is short-lived, because short-lived things usually are not really worth the time and effort and resources we put into things, right? And so they like things that are long lasting, and that's why they're very good at maintaining good relationships with other people, because they see the potential in maintaining that relationship in the long run. They tend to be diplomatic, tactful communicators, charismatic as well, I would say. They're known as the flirts, right? So they can be very charming, very accommodating. Communication and intelligence are usually their strong suits. They understand how to be diplomatic, how to communicate with others, how to make interactions fun and witty for others. Anytime we have an air sign, every time we have a sign represented by a human being, we're talking about very refined skills in communication and relating with other people, especially when it comes to less intimate settings. So people who are your business partners, people who are acquaintances, that are part of your social group, social circles, where, just knowing people can have its own kind of social credit, social value with it. They can be very charming, accommodating when they want to be in someone's good books, and they can make a very good impression. So they're magnetic to people, and they're very good at making the most of any contact and any opportunity available to them. So the keyword is always value. And with Moon in Libra, there is a lot of focus on relationships, right? A lot of focus on social interactions, and they can kind of derive their sense of worth and sense of fulfillment depending on their social network. You will find that Moon in Libra people tend to be, they have a lot of friends, they have a lot of contacts, they don't tend to have a lot of enemies, because they are just so good at relating with people and understanding what triggers people, what people like to hear, how you can connect with people based on various common grounds, common interests, shared goals. They also have a natural capacity for long-term partnership. Again, long-term. They're capable of compromise and knowing when to let go. Again, Saturn is exalted here, and Venus has its Mula Trikona, its strongest position here, aside from exaltation. And whenever we have Venus strong, we're good at partnering with other people based on assessing our own worth, what we bring to the table, and assessing what other people can give to us in return. And they can be great at long-term partnerships, as they don't feel the need to dominate. They don't always need to get their way. You see, there is a lot of wisdom in Libra in understanding that you don't always have to win, and actually you win the long game by giving up some things in the short term. They innately understand the great value of having long-term relationships in both the private and the public sphere. They're naturally liberal in their partnerships, attempting to treat their partners as they would treat themselves. Again, it's all about balance, right? And balance means I don't demand things that I can't offer in return. So Libra's strong ability to recognize what it needs to let go of in order to be healthy and happy really helps the moon adapt in the most optimal way to changing conditions. So this is a changeable sign, movable sign. There is no problem here changing gears, shifting to new social environments as needed if they feel that their current social circle is not in their best interest and they're not really mutually beneficial to each other. They don't mind making the switch, because we have an air sign in a movable modality. So Changes due to social circumstances can be frequent due to just not having a lot of things in common, not having a lot of things to communicate about. Now, what about the emotional needs of Moon in Libra? First of all, they have a need to form mutually beneficial relationships with resourceful and competent partners. So unlike the fire signs, which are very much focused on the self, what can I do, what can I achieve, what inspires me, air signs tend to really want to understand the other people's point of view, and they like to connect with people that can offer something in return. So it's much more team focused, much more collaborative here. They can be drawn to partners who are capable, resourceful in some capacity, and can contribute meaningfully to the partnership. So it's not about really selfishness or extreme self-interest, but in the end, that's what relationships are about, right? If we can't really gain from the other person, if the person isn't really contributing to us, enriching our life, what is the point really of relationship? Relationships take a lot of work. They require time investment, compromise, managing our emotions, bringing, certain resources to the table. So relationships take a lot out of us. And so Libra has the wisdom to recognize that if I'm going to contribute all of this to the other person, to spending time with people, I need to see something in return. And so win-win situations are very much something that they're good at. So they tend to associate only with people who have something to give to them, some kind of value. And their emotional well-being is deeply tied to having dependable partners who have their back. It's all about complementing each other. It's the seventh sign. The first sign is, and the first house is us and our life path. The seventh sign and the seventh house is what is opposite us. What can we get from other people? Why do we connect with other people? Because together, complementary, we can create something even better as a win-win situation. And that's the other point here in the list of emotional needs, core emotional needs of Moon and Libra people. They like win-win situations that make it worth their time and energy. They like equitable and fair exchanges. And so their emotional well-being is really tied to the constant evaluation of value and cost. They feel most secure when they understand the price, so to speak, metaphorically, that they're paying for their fulfillment. So they don't really like, that's why Libra is such a good sign of long-term decision making. For example, taking drugs, just as a very extreme example. In the short term, maybe that can feel good in the moment, right? If they didn't feel good, people wouldn't get addicted to them. But Libra, for example, if it's healthy in a person or if Venus is really strong in a person's chart, they're unlikely to go down that path because it just doesn't make sense in the long run as a beneficial solution, a beneficial contribution to our life, is it? So they can really distinguish between short-term value and long-term fulfillment. And they are emotionally wired to seek win-win situations. They're sensitive to whether a relationship is worth the energy they're putting into it. And they keep mental track of the balance and need the give and take to feel equitable with their partner. So they really are just simply subconsciously always keeping track of, is this relationship worthwhile for both parties? It goes both ways. If they feel that they're not really contributing to the partner, that will impact their own sense of self-worth, their self-esteem, and so they will also want to exit the relationship. So it's not only about what they can gain, but also what they can give. Another one of their emotional needs is that it can change with time. It can change with evolving circumstances. Their preference for partners can be changeable because they can seek better options through changing the people in their lives. So as a movable signs, their emotional needs and values are subject to frequent change. The things they value at age 20 will be vastly different from what they value at age 50 because their evaluative criteria shift as their life circumstances change. And this is the natural state of things, isn't it? We do change over time, and the moon is about changing and adapting to circumstances for optimal contentment and survival. And so they sometimes outgrow relationships when their evaluative criteria shift. And I think this can also be a little bit why Libra in general, they have a reputation for being flirts and for kind of jumping from one relationship to another sometimes, or just simply, let's say, having a couple of different options available to them. This all comes down to this archetype of Libra and being so associated with win-win outcomes, with worth, with value, and with having a lot of good options available, right? They need to weigh the pros and cons and feel safe when they can make well-rounded decisions that take into account both their heart and their intellect. So the moon is a very emotional planet, but Libra is an intellectual sign, it's an air sign. And so they need the freedom and autonomy to assess their situations, to evaluate options, to make choices based on their own viewpoint. They strive to make well-rounded decisions that consider both their heart and their mind, and they thrive when they can evaluate situations fairly and find the best possible outcome for themselves. So they feel comfortable in situations and relationships where things make sense. And this has to be both emotionally fulfilling, but also it has to make sense on paper. It has to make rational, intellectual sense. So again, we're coming back to the theme of balance here, because the scales are about balance. So, very, very passionate connections that don't really contribute anything beneficial to their life are unlikely to be suitable for Moon and Libra people. They prefer something that makes sense in all domains of their life, something that can really contribute to them. But at the same time, Venus is about making long-term good choices, and it really is not a good long-term choice to be with someone that you don't love, that you don't have an emotional connection with. So this position can be really, really helpful for a relationship. I mentioned already with the Moon and Gemini placement that, in my opinion, Moon in Gemini and Moon in Libra are the most relationship-oriented signs. They really crave partnering with others. They really see the value in connecting and collaborating with other people. They see the point of collaborating, teamwork, and win-win outcomes. Another one of the emotional core needs of Moon in Libra is harmony, tact, and diplomacy in relationships. So they prefer to be on good terms with most people. They will work to maintain harmonious connections. They will put their charm, they will put their diplomacy at work, and they're very good communicators, as we said. And communication is super vital for maintaining good long-term relations with others. They value equality. They value mutual respect in partnerships. They wouldn't be okay with a partner who disrespects them or is harsh or lacks, let's say, good manners towards them. Or relationships where there's frequent fighting, a lot of drama. Not really good for a person with Moon in Libra in the long term. It can be very, very exhausting for them because they prefer a sense of harmony and balance. They need relationships where fairness and harmony are maintained, and they value diplomacy and tact in human relationships and in how they navigate conflicts. Again, Venus is the archetype of the diplomat. So they prefer to be civil with others, and they like people to be civil to them in return. Moon and Libra people get a lot of emotional nourishment through social relationships and the exchange of ideas, connecting with diverse people. Again, this is about everyone contributing with unique value to the partnership, to the relationship. And they find emotional nourishment through regular opportunities to connect with different people, attending social events. Having some sort of social community is pretty important for them. They're a very social sign. They thrive on communication, on dialogue, the exchange of ideas. They need partners and friends who can engage them in witty, stimulating conversations and shared interests. So again, a lot of similarities here with the Moon in Gemini. It's a very social placement. And it's really an emotional need for them to have this kind of regular intellectual exchange and stimulation with people in their lives. Another need of theirs is access to new contacts and opportunities. So as the moon looks everywhere, that's how they describe in Vedic text the moon, that it's a planet that looks everywhere, looks at all the opportunities and sees what it can benefit from. Libra is living in the bazaar. The habitat of Libra is considered the bazaar, the market, which abounds in opportunities. It's a very rich environment full of options, people, and different opportunities. And so Moon and Libra people are grounded in social reality and thrive in environments where there is a bazaar-like atmosphere of trade, commerce, and human connection. So similarly to Moon in Gemini, they might be happier in like big cities, places where there can be a lot of exchange, a lot of options to choose from. They don't like to feel limited. They like to always have a lot of opportunities for connecting, for benefiting. Isolation and limitation distress them emotionally. And finally, beautiful or enjoyable environments and material comforts and pleasures are emotionally important to Moon in Libra. They're the aesthetic sign, right? They're associated with beauty, with harmony, with refined things, with luxury things. And they typically need their surroundings to be aesthetically pleasing and harmonious. Also, wearing branded things, being beautiful, being well dressed, having a beautiful home, that can go a long way in earning a social credit among our peers. Like, let's be real, this is the material world we live in. And again, the wisdom of Libra recognizes that looking good, being presentable helps with your social interactions, and social interactions can really benefit your life. So it's all very much connected, and it's not just pointless materialism. Venus rules everything beautiful, so beauty matters deeply to their emotional well-being, and they need a life that includes enough material comfort and beauty to feel satisfied, because after all, we're talking about Venus. Venus is about our sensual nature, our senses. And they tend to thrive in environments where there is access to art, to culture, music, refined pleasures of some sort. Again, a very social sign. As with every moon placement, Moon in Libra can have potential shadow sides and potential problematic areas or potential challenges. One of them, for example, is something that Libra is pretty well known for, is the indecision, analysis paralysis. So similar to Moon in Virgo, they can struggle sometimes with making difficult or big decisions in the emotional or private sphere, especially because we're talking about the moon here, due to being able to see the pros and cons of every approach and being too analytical rather than listening to their intuition or gut feeling. Sometimes it's easier to make a decision when we just go with our gut, because then it's a little bit more clear. If we try to weigh all the options, make a list of pros and cons, analyze a bit too much, we can drown in information, and it becomes harder and harder to make a conclusive decision. So their ability to see multiple perspectives can paralyze them when decisions require commitment. They become caught in weighing options endlessly without moving forward, and they intellectualize their emotions rather than trusting their deeper knowing. This, of course, is a problem with any kind of air moon sign, because the moon craves like emotional connection and emotional comfort, and intellectual endeavors don't always directly correlate to emotional fulfillment. Another potential problem area with Moon in Libra is their focus on social charm, diplomacy, making good impressions, which can lead to sometimes superficial relationships. There can be a bit of a tendency towards surface level connections here, because when you're always trying to be diplomatic and charming and nice, you can avoid difficult conversations, and you can avoid very deep, profound contacts with people. So their focus is on social charm, on making good impressions, which can lead to superficial connections, and they may avoid deeper emotional intimacy in favor of maintaining pleasant interactions. They can maintain pleasant interactions while keeping others at arm's length emotionally. They analyze their feelings rather than experiencing them fully. So that can be a bit of a painful position, because again, moon is ultimately how we crave this kind of very strong intimate bonding with others, especially our intimate partners. Another problem area could be their inconsistency, their abandonment pattern, if you will, because sometimes they can struggle to commit when they believe that better options might just be around the corner, and they may abandon relationships or situations when difficulties arise. Because this is a movable sign, and this is the moon, when there is a change to how the person feels. So when the moon experiences a change, they prefer to change the people that they interact with to coincide with their emotions. So when they discover what they perceive as better options out there, whether that can be new partners, new social circles, new opportunities, they may quickly move on, leaving others feeling a little bit disposable. And so when relationships or situations become difficult or require sacrifice or require a lot of work, a lot of courage, Libra is the opposite sign of Aries, which is about putting a lot of strength, willpower, courage into things, fighting for things. Libra doesn't really like fighting. It's a diplomat. It's about negotiation. And so when relationships reach a point where you have to really fight for them because they're going through a tough period, Moon and Libra people sometimes prefer to give up and go for some easier, better option rather than sacrifice or work really, really hard at it, because their instinct is to seek better options rather than work through challenges. And that can be a little bit problematic, because any serious relationships can go through difficult times. Another potential challenge with displacement is that they dislike excess and extreme and huge risks, which sounds like a really positive thing, but it can also prevent them from taking the bold actions that sometimes are needed for significant growth and accomplishment. I mean, sometimes we need to take on a little bit challenging task, more ambitious goals. This is the sign opposite Aries, as we said. Aries is about taking risks, about entrepreneurial adventures, establishing the self by by taking risks in life. And so Moon and Libra people are not the most ambitious. And so their focus on contentment and satisfaction rather than lofty goals and dreams can lead them to settle for less than they're capable of achieving. Or for example, they can settle for a partner because this is the Moon, so it's more about the personal sphere. They can maybe settle for friends and partners that are not ultimately what they're really craving for, but that is easier to maintain, less problematic, better on paper, if you will. So their preference for balanced and moderate approaches means that they avoid growth through challenge sometimes. And finally, because Venus is a planet of contentment, sensuality, material pleasures, there can be a bit of an over-reliance here on achieving security and happiness through material or social pleasures or partnerships, making their emotional stability fragile when external circumstances change. As we said, Libra is about partnership, so there is a strong craving here for partnership, and there can be a little bit of over-reliance on other people to make us happy. Aries as the first sign signifies the self. Libra as the seventh sign signifies other people. So there is a lot of reliance here on others, on external things to fulfill our emotional needs. And so when external things change, when circumstances or relationships change, their emotional security also crumbles. So their sense of being worthy of love becomes conditional on being fair, resourceful, and beneficial for other people, or simply being in partnership. So they can be a little bit hard on themselves and feel low when they don't have a partner, equating kind of their worth with what their worth is to other people, as in, their partnerships and relationships. They can become a little bit dependent on the approval and admiration of others, using social success and partnership to validate their sense of self. Moving on to the ever mysterious Scorpio sign. So what can we say about people who have their moon placed in the sign of Scorpio? What are their unique strengths, qualities, and traits? First of all, the first thing we notice is their strong, profound intuition and penetrating insight into human psychology. The moon is an entirely feminine planet, and it relies on intuition to navigate the world. And in water signs, but especially in Scorpio, this really heightens psychic powers. Scorpio is a very penetrative, insightful sign that can intuitively arrive at hidden truths. Again, it's the eighth sign. The eighth house represents the occult, hidden truths and mysteries. And so they have an exceptional ability to see through facades and understand the deeper motivations, the shadows, the psychological complexities of people and situations. Nothing really gets past their perceptive radar. They're very perceptive about themselves. They're very introverted emotionally, and going through life really analyzing themselves psychologically gives them also a lot of insight, together with this strong psychic intuition, into other people's inner world. So they really understand the psychology of other people and their inner motivations. Another strong trait associated with Moon in Scorpio is their sixth sense for hidden truths and danger. They possess a heightened sensory perception or sixth sense that allows them to anticipate worst possible outcomes and scan their environment for danger. They naturally perceive what is hidden or secret, sensing deep truths that others might miss. And they are attuned to danger and the motivations of others, making them extremely difficult to con. And this is because Scorpio is depicted as a scorpion in Vedic astrology, and it's described as having a lot of bristles, a lot of hairs on its body, which of course hair is what we use to be sensitive to our environment. Any kind of movement of the bristles of any kind of insect is how they sense that there is danger, there is movement in the air. They sense the moving air. So this can kind of symbolize Moon in Scorpio's strong perception and understanding of hidden dangers that might be coming and others might not sense them. Another trait with this placement is the extreme emotional and mental resilience and psychological toughness of Moon and Scorpio people. So despite feeling things 10 times more deeply than others, Scorpio Moon natives are remarkably resilient and can really handle intense emotional pressure without cracking. If anything, I think they sometimes unintentionally or subconsciously put themselves in very intense situations, things that other people might cower from. They kind of dive head first. It's like they want to test this kind of ability to be resilient. They're capable of withstanding a lot of emotional pain, a lot of psychological pressure. They possess remarkable psychological toughness and can navigate intense emotional terrain that would overwhelm most people. So it's kind of like they're very adept at navigating through any kind of tricky emotional and psychological situations. And it's this ability to go through anything that is very profound, very tough emotionally, that really gives them insight into all the different layers of the human psyche. That's how they become so adept at understanding human consciousness. They have a great capacity for determination. They have a strong willpower and focus. They are a fixed water sign. And they possess intense focus and determination once they set their mind to something. But this is not only because they're fixed and they can be consistent, but also because they're ruled by Mars. And Mars, as we know, is depicted as a planet, as a circle with a pointed arrow. So there's a lot of intensity of focus there to the exclusion of everything else. Also, they are a creature, the scorpion is a creature that has many feet, and so they're very tenacious. They can hold on with unwavering persistence. We saw that with the crab symbolism, that any creature that has a lot of little feet can really hold on to things tenaciously without letting go, no matter what kind of pressure you apply to it. So this focused intensity of Scorpio allows them to achieve deep mastery in whatever they commit to, and they can really get to know their partner in such a profound depth that the partner might often be surprised that the Moon in Scorpio person knows them way better than they know themselves. This is a really incredible capacity to understand people at a very profound level. They also carry, of course, sexual magnetism and an enigmatic aura. This is something very well known for any Scorpio placement. So this is a passionate combination that makes them very profoundly magnetic, very sexually attractive, and sometimes they can be very mysterious. They have an enigmatic presence that draws others in through the intensity and mystery. So people can sense this psychologically intense, emotionally strong and intense aura. It appeals to people. It's just very, very sexy, very magnetic. They naturally attract and are attracted to dramatic, deeply transformative relationships. Surface level things are really just not that interesting to them. And of course, they're also characterized by their strong passions. They hunger for a sense of profundity and intensity in their emotional experiences. They're capable of profound, intimate connections, though this can take extreme form sometimes. And of course, people with this placement need to be very aware of going into obsessive, toxic, and addictive situations in any kind of way. Their intensity runs deep and they experience emotions at a level most others cannot fully comprehend. Now let's dive into the core emotional needs of people who have Moon in the sign of Scorpio. First of all, they have a need to feel emotionally safe and protected, to be very clear about the motivations and true feelings of loved ones. So above all, they crave this kind of security. Scorpio is very much a sign of security, emotional and psychological safety. They need a partner who won't betray them, so they put them sometimes through tests to test their loyalty. They need a partner who's consistent, loyal, and trustworthy. And without this foundation, they cannot really relax and open their heart. It takes a lot to get to the vulnerable part of Scorpio. Again, they are a creature with a hard shell that hides a vulnerable inside. So it's hard to penetrate the wall that they put around them. But once you get into their inner circle, they can be very loving and very tender and very vulnerable. They need their environment and relationships to be free from emotional threats, from the potentiality of betrayal. And because they scan constantly for danger, they need partners in circumstances that are genuinely trustworthy so that their vigilance can relax. Of course, that can be sometimes a difficult task because there can be a little bit of paranoia with displacement, as we will see later on. They have an emotional need and hunger for intensity in emotional experiences. They have a hunger for the expression of their inner passions because, Mars is a passionate planet. And here we have the most passionate combination, which is the combination of Mars, fire, and water, because Scorpio is a water sign. So this placement is very, very passionate, very intense. They crave connection with others more intensely than almost any other sign. And they need environments where their intensity, passion, and emotional extremes are accepted rather than pathologized. So they need a partner who really understands and also likes this kind of more obsessive, more intense emotional experiences. They need partners who can match or at least honor their depth. They need permission for intensity and passion. They need partners who understand and accept their strong emotional nature. There are a lot of partners for whom that could be a little bit too much. And so they need the right person who actually finds the beauty in this intensity rather than judge it. They have an emotional need for a profound, intimate connection, for emotionally merging with someone else, for deep, meaningful relationships. And that doesn't have to be with another person. That can be with friendships, that can be with family members, that can be with pets, or it can even be through spirituality. Just having that sense of releasing control and feeling safe in the embrace of another being, even if that being can be God, right? Just feeling nurtured and emotionally bonded, losing the ego consciousness in the connection with another being. They seek profound belonging, a merging of consciousness, ideally with another partner, and they want emotional and ego merging with another creature at the deepest level. They need authentic, deeply meaningful relationships where they can be truly seen and understood. At their best, they can connect to others in very genuine, very deep ways that foster trust, a sense of belonging, and extraordinary love and passion. Above all else, Moon in Scorpio people need a safe space to withdraw, to process emotions regularly, and to do inner work. So again, this is more of an introverted placement. All the water signs need a lot of time to process their emotion because they can be psychic sponges. They need regular, substantial alone time to recuperate, to process their feelings. The habitat of the hole, so basically in Vedic astrology, the scorpion is said to inhabit a hole in the ground. And so the hole represents where they go to process deep emotional and psychological pain in isolation. They need space to withdraw, to reflect, to work through the deep psychological material that they carry with themselves. And without this, they can become very destabilized, exhausted, and overwhelmed. Moon in Scorpio people can offer unwavering, fierce loyalty, but also expect it in return. So once they have decided that a person is the one for them, or chose someone, a friend, for their inner circle of trust, they will go to great lengths to support, protect, and fight for that person. You know, Mars is a fighter, so they really fight for their love here, and they can cross a lot of boundaries just for the sake of protecting those that they love. So this is kind of the ride or die kind of loyalty and mentality to relationships and partnerships. And they need partners who reciprocate this unwavering devotion and commitment as well. They also have a need for a stable go-to feeling, a sense of belonging or devotion that anchors them. So it's like an emotional anchor. They need someone or something that they can devote themselves to completely. Again, we're talking about merging, letting go of our rational mind, of our ego nature, of our idea of being separate from the universe and merging somehow. And there can be very different outlets. Some can be very unhealthy, but some can be extremely profound and beautiful. And so Moon and Scorpio people really need to find that kind of outlet that lets them merge with universal consciousness. They need relationships where they can experience a deep sense of belonging and devotion that is permanent and secure. They also need a sense of emotional control and mastery. They like to feel in control of their own emotions and actions, of course, as a result of their emotions. So there is an existential need to confront psychological vulnerabilities here, to work toward gaining mastery over the emotional realm. It's very much about control. We know Scorpio is about control, right? So they need to understand and manage their emotions rather than be controlled by them. They definitely need contacts and relationships that offer both sexual and emotional bonding. So they want it all from a partner. And they need relationships where physical and emotional intimacy are intertwined. So kind of more surface level connections, or basically emotional connections that don't have a strong physical element might not be very satisfying for them. Mars is very much about raw sexuality. So sexuality and emotional bonding can be inseparate for them, and they can be one of those people that can't really be sexual with someone without being in love with them, or at least infatuated with them. There needs to be some level of intellectual, mental, emotional, and psychological merging as well as physical one. More than anything, I think they need a partner who really accepts them as they are. They can be very complex emotionally and very intense, which can be heavy for some people. So they need a partner who's really accepting of their intensity, sometimes of their jealousy, of their possessiveness, of their need for predictability and control. They need partners who understand these tendencies and actually like them for it. They see these qualities as not character flaws, but expressions of their intense need to protect and keep those that they love. So there can be a lot of possessiveness with any fixed sign. There is a sense of control and possessiveness with the moon placement. They need reassurance and stability from the partner. And they need partners who understand their need for some degree of control and predictability in relationships. And as I said, it's very common for them in the beginning to put you through certain tests to test your loyalty so that they can really feel safe in letting go and allowing you to see their vulnerable side. They definitely need healthy outlets for their depth, their complex inner world, and their interest in life's mystery. So you can find a lot of people with Moon in Scorpio being interested in the occult, in tarot, in astrology, in psychology and psychotherapy, in hypnotism, and also in spirituality, because spirituality is ultimately one of the healthiest ways that we can channel this kind of need for profundity in our lives. They thrive when they have opportunities to transform, evolve spiritually, and work through their deep psychological material. So let's go through some potential shadow sides of these placements and some potential challenges and problematic areas. First of all, their proclivity for emotional obsessiveness and extreme focus can be a bit of a challenge. They crave profound merging and emotional connection, and this can turn into possessiveness, jealousy, and obsessiveness. They can become fixated on partners or relationships, unable to let go of them even when the connection seems unhealthy or one-sided. So once they really merge with someone, it's very hard to let go and move on and stop thinking and obsessing about the person. Another potential problematic area with this placement is the paranoia and the negative lens. So they're always kind of mindful of the potential for betrayal, dishonesty, danger coming from the outside world. And their sixth sense for danger, combined with their tamasic tendencies of kind of viewing the potential problems in their environment, can lead them to see betrayal, dishonesty, and danger where none exists. So they can be a little bit paranoid with that. They interpret neutral events through an overly dark or negative mood lens sometimes, creating intangible anxieties and chronic paranoia. Another potential issue, and that is a common issue with any fixed sign, is the emotional rigidity of this placement. So they can get stuck in certain moods, in certain emotional states for a bit too long. So this is a fixed water sign, and when water is unable to move, it turns into a swamp. So metaphorically speaking, they can fall into persistent low moods, depression, low burning anger, or strong frustration, and it can be hard to adapt and move on from these mental states. They have a desire for control and for psychological manipulation. And so they're so used to controlling their own emotions and circumstances. This can also translate into trying to control other people as well. This can also damage spontaneity and the fun of emotional unpredictability in relationships. They can use their psychological insight to control rather than to connect with their partners. Their strong protective mechanisms can sometimes incline them to secrecy, which may prevent them from the vulnerability required for deep intimacy. So there can be a bit of a contradiction here. On the one hand, Moon in Scorpio is craving this ultimate bonding, full trust, and merging with another person. But on the other hand, they're always kind of on the lookout for potential for betrayal and disloyalty. So they hurt their own feelings a lot of the times, and they damage the relationships that they crave to maintain. So they can be so in love with a person that they become obsessed, and this kind of emotional heaviness or need to manipulate others, to control them, it can actually damage relationships, and that's what they ultimately crave. So it can be a bit of a difficult placement sometimes. That's why Moon is said to be debilitated in the sign of Scorpio. Again, we mentioned the tendency for jealousy and possessiveness in intimate relationships. Some people really like that. Some people like a little bit of this to trigger the passion, to keep the fire burning. As long as it doesn't go into excesses, as long as you find the right partner who's also a little bit like that, I think that can be a good thing. But when it becomes extreme, I think nobody can really be happy with that long term. And their intensity can sometimes be too much for some partners, because Scorpio is a water sign ruled by the fiery Mars. It imbues them with this intense, crashing passion rather than like a calm emotional flow, which is what the Moon typically craves. And so this level of emotional intensity, this need for merging, can overwhelm some partners who are not equally deep or passionate, or people who are just not ready to invest so much energy purely in their relationship. They can struggle, as we said, with spontaneity, because there is just so much need for emotional control, both of themselves and other people. And they may keep others at a distance even as they crave merging. This rigidity prevents the natural emotional flow that authentic intimacy requires. Finally, they may hide their true feelings from others for self-preservation. To protect their sensitive core, they often withdraw and may appear secretive or even cold to outsiders. So if you don't know them too well and they withdraw, you might come to the conclusion that they don't care about you anymore, or that they don't like you. And in fact, they're just trying to process their emotions, and they're trying to protect their vulnerable emotional nature. They can project sometimes a threatening aura. If you look at a Scorpio, it looks quite scary, right? So this is a metaphor for this kind of aura that people with strong Scorpio placements can project. They want to feel a little bit threatening to others as a self-preservation tactic, and they use the stink to kind of scare potential dangers away. But this can mean that they hide their true vulnerability and emotional needs from those closest to them. And there has to be vulnerability and trust in partnerships. What happens when the moon is placed in the sign of Sagittarius? What are the unique qualities, traits, and strengths that come with this placement? First of all, people with moon in Sagittarius are motivated towards activities that are inspirational, fun, and authentically called to them. The moon and Sagittarius are both sattvic, so moon is a sattvic planet, Sagittarius is a sattvic sign, which creates a personality ultimately motivated towards activities that are inspirational. They're driven by innate goodness and actions that strengthen character. So this is more dharmic. This is about seeing good opportunities for progress and striving towards them. And moon and Sagittarius people can't really muster motivation for topics and fields which are not really inspiring or genuinely interesting to them, though they must tend to mundane matters out of necessity. So again, as with all fire signs, they need to be fired up. They need to have kind of intuition and passion activated for them to be consistent with something. Moon and Sagittarius people have an innate desire to see the world and themselves in a more positive, optimistic light. It's the most optimistic sign, right? It's the 9th sign of faith. So they approach life with optimism and a sense that possibilities are endless. They will not be too concerned with the mundane, nor would they be happy dwelling on the more negative, dark, or heavy sides of life. They naturally redirect their focus towards higher possibilities in life. Moon and Sagittarius people can be very goal-driven, very visionary. Their mind is hungry to explore the world and see how high they can climb in pursuit of a distant ideal or dream. They're symbolized by an archer shooting towards a distant target, and so they view life through this prism. They think they should always be aiming towards a distant, far-reaching goal that is very high in standing, high in morality, high in potential for making the world a better place. So they can have a lot of ambitions and lofty goals in their lives, and their mind is very hungry to explore the world and see how high they can climb in pursuit of a distant ideal or dream. But since this is the moon placement rather than the sun placement, this can just translate into someone who's emotionally fulfilled when they're striving towards something, when they have ambitious goals, when they're surrounded by positivity and optimism. And they can be very funny and happy and sunny people in their intimate circle. So people who know them really well, their best friends, their intimate partners, their family members, they might see them as very sunny, very optimistic and happy-go-lucky type of personalities. But essentially, they have an emotional need to feel that they're working towards something noble and uplifting for themselves and for other people as well. Moon and Sagittarius people tend to be intuitive, truth-seeking, interested in expanding their knowledge, becoming wise. And so yes, any fire sign, they're strong in intuition. The moon here stimulates the mind to derive knowledge through immediate perception, focusing on intuiting truth and higher concepts. They're interested in expanding their knowledge and becoming wise. So they can really see the world through this prism because it's the moon. And so they really crave to expand their knowledge. They feel happy when they're acquiring more knowledge and feeling wiser. Influenced by Jupiter's tendency to dive deep, they're often profoundly wise regarding the philosophies that they subscribe to. Since they're ruled by Jupiter, they can be naturally egalitarian, benevolent, and generous. Jupiter is the great benefic, and so they're equipped with qualities of generosity, benevolence, open-mindedness, tolerance, and a light-hearted nature. As I said, they can be great friends, great family members, great partners who are very optimistic, generous, and benevolent, and they have genuine kind intentions towards people, unless there are, of course, afflictions in the chart. They tend to be naturally egalitarian, finding the source of creation in every aspect of life. They often feel as though they're doing God's work. They can be very energetic, very motivated people. When moon is in fire signs, they need this kind of inner motivation and inspiration. They like to be fired up, full of energy. They have this intuitive drive and proactivity about them. And this is a masculine sign as well. So it's all about action, putting their ideas and knowledge into action. And their emotional satisfaction is dependent on how proud they are of their actions. They can feel fulfilled through making progress towards goals and taking initiative. And so Jupiter sometimes acts like a lightning bolt of inspiration, causing them to have sudden strong impulses to do good or to jump toward new meaningful ideas. So this can be quite an adventurous placement. Because it's the moon, they don't really feel happy unless they feel like they're part of some kind of progress, some kind of adventure, some goal that they're striving towards. And once they identify the goal, they move quickly and decisively towards it. Because this is a dual sign, Moon and Sagittarius people don't tend to get stuck too long in one place or in one environment if it's not productive. They can be quite adaptable and they just, observe to see what works and what doesn't work. They like to work on themselves, improve themselves, because dual signs are all about improvement and knowledge. The habitat of Sagittarius is described as being land, emphasizing their adaptability and not being tied to one particular place, one particular environment. So they're focused on continuing towards their goal and happy to change their circumstances as needed. So for the sake of their goals and objectives, they don't really mind change. They don't mind changing their environment, and they're unlikely to be stuck in a rut for too long. Also, because Jupiter is the guru planet, they feel happy when they can accumulate wisdom, but also share that wisdom with other people. When they can be natural teachers, counselors to others, they can feel happy when they expand their own knowledge, when they can impart knowledge on other people and feel useful to others through their counseling guru kind of abilities. So they express affection by providing advice, expanding the horizons of people around them, expanding their perspectives of people that they love. So they naturally inspire others through their optimism, through their moral conviction, and their belief in higher possibilities. So what are the emotional needs of people with displacement? First of all, they crave partners and collaborators who share their belief system and principles. They can't really be tied down to a partnership for any reason other than that their own internal beliefs and principles are pointing in the same direction. So there needs to be a core alignment in goals and objectives and beliefs, faith, and principles. It's a very principle sign. Ninth house is about our faith, our religion, our morality, and ethics. So partnerships can only really flourish here when there is mutual alignment on these perspectives. So if marriage or partnerships is part of their belief system, if they truly believe that their partnerships is indispensable for their far-reaching goal, they can be loyal and they can fight for the relationship because their self-worth is deeply tied to their ability to live according to a specific set of moral rules and philosophical worldviews. Because it's the moon, we're talking about our inner world, our inner self-worth, how we perceive ourselves and other people. With this Sagittarius placement, the moon here ties its self-worth to the ability to live according to one specific set of moral rules and philosophical worldviews. So it doesn't matter what their views are. They need to feel like they're living in alignment with it, that they're fulfilling their potential. And they need partners who understand and respect their moral code and can align with their vision of a meaningful life. So they feel truly accepted and loved only when others recognize their moral strength or praise their philosophical wisdom. They need partners who admire them, who respect them for their integrity and for their wisdom, for their ability to accumulate and share knowledge with others. And they also need to be recognized for the progress that they're making on their personal journey, on their spiritual journey, because again, dual signs are very much about the path to improvement. Their ideal partners would really appreciate their idealism, their ambitiousness, their optimism, their pursuit of a higher purpose, of higher goals. Partners who are a little bit too realistic, too negative would not be suitable for them because they need to maintain that kind of inner faith that they can achieve even their most wild and ambitious goals and dreams. So they need partners who support them in that faith and in that optimism and actually admire them for their perseverance towards their goals. Anything that gives them a sense of expansion and growth can be welcome as an emotional treat for them because Jupiter is all about understanding, compassion, and expansion. So for example, exploring foreign countries, traveling, trying different belief systems, exploring different religions and principles of morality, that can be really emotionally fulfilling for them. They also need a sense of freedom to pursue meaningful goals without being constrained by other people's expectations or limitations. That's why it's not the most relationship-oriented placement always because it's such an adventuristic sign and it really doesn't like to be tied down to other people's belief systems or rationality. And so unless they find a partner who's aligned with their goals, where there is like a lot of alignment with their belief system and their ambitions, people who appreciate their adventurous spirit, they would prefer probably to be on their own. Also, they would not really be happy dwelling on the more negative, dark, heavy sides of life. So people who are a little bit more gloomy, more focused on the negative sides of life, or being a little bit too materialistic, too grounded in reality, too realistic, might not be ideal partners for them, because they're just kind of, killing that fire, putting down the fire within them. They naturally redirect their focus towards higher possibilities, and they cannot be satisfied with merely surviving materially or overcoming struggles. They need to feel that their life has purpose and meaning, and they need to be around people and in environments that support an optimistic, growth-oriented, or spiritually engaged approach to life. So as with every placement, there are certain shadow sides, certain areas of potential problems. So what are the shadow sides of the Moon in Sagittarius placement? First of all, they have a potential for deep dissatisfaction and a sense of disappointment or shame if they fall short of their ideals, principles, or if they're unable to reach their goals. I would say this is the most painful part of this placement, because so much of their identity is tied around pursuing lofty goals, being consistent with their ideals and principles. And if life works out in a way that they are just unable to continue pursuing those goals, if they fall short of their expectations, significantly short, there can be a profound sense of emotional pain and dissatisfaction, loss of self-esteem. Also, when they actually complete the goal that they've set for themselves, when inspiration fades or when their goals are achieved, they can become restless or unmotivated, looking for the next big thing rather than finding contentment in what is. So their happiness is highly dependent, as with all male signs which are focused on actions and achievements. So their happiness is dependent on their own satisfactions with their actions and achievements. Another potential challenge with this placement is partnership. So their strong individualism and their need for space and freedom to grow may be incompatible with a standard, committed, traditional relationship. They don't really like to be tied down to one place, to one environment, one way of doing things. They like to always expand and always strive for something more ambitious. So this fundamental adaptability can create difficulties in traditional relationships, as most people crave stability and predictability to feel emotionally safe. So they may struggle to stay committed when the relationship feels like it limits their freedoms or spiritual growth. Their eye is always on the distant horizon, the next goal, the next big adventure. And as we mentioned, they're very identified with their actions. And so their happiness is highly dependent on their own satisfactions with their actions and achievements. So Moon and fire signs feel their emotional state must always depend on their actions. They can't simply be. They can't just be satisfied with the way things are. They are not very good at receiving. They prefer doing and giving. And that can be a bit of a painful position. And they must learn that receiving and rest are also valid forms of nourishment. A potentially problematic aspect of this placement is that they can become quite intent on their ideas and beliefs, sometimes veering into dogma. They can become a little bit too self-righteous, sometimes intolerant of different perspectives. So because Sagittarius is a Kshatriya sign, this is the warrior caste, so they're willing to fight for what they believe in. And so if they're passionate about what they believe in, if they believe that this is the proper, the right thing, then opposing viewpoints can ruffle their feathers more than other people. They can become righteous, intolerant of different perspectives, and lose their otherwise Jupiterian ingrained egalitarianism. Because they're so motivated by achieving a hefty goal, some target that they've set for themselves, they can kind of become oblivious to everything except the goal that they seek, and they can ignore the niceties of life. They can ignore people that don't fit into their immediate goals and agendas. And so they can become kind of blind to everything except what they're trying to achieve in the moment. In relationships, this can unfortunately sometimes manifest as insensitivity to the needs of the partner, neglecting relationship maintenance, and blindness to how their single-minded pursuit affects those that they love. Sagittarius is not a very personal sign. It's not a very emotionally charged connective sign, and the moon is, as we know, always craving connection and intimate bonds. So there is a fundamental conflict here because the moon's desires are deeply personal and the moon craves partnership, whereas Sagittarius encourages self-sacrifice for a higher mission. So this tension can create emotional distance in relationships. Partners may feel that the Sagittarius moon person cares more about their cause than about them as individuals. So their relationships can start off very enthusiastic, very passionate, but then kind of fizzle along the way because the excitement wanes, and ultimately the moon in Sagittarius person can be quite individualistic and not really put in the work or do the compromises required for long-term relationships. And finally, they're quite dependent in their emotional well-being on feeling inspired, feeling motivated by their current path. And so without inspiration or a sense of purpose, they can fall into restlessness, dissatisfaction, low moods. When they lack a meaningful goal or cause to work toward, they may struggle to find emotional stability. So these are the potentially challenging aspects of this placement. Moving on to the sign of Capricorn, what are the unique traits, strengths, and qualities that are associated with the moon placed in the sign of Capricorn? First of all, people with the moon in Capricorn, as you can imagine, tend to be very rationally centered and very pragmatic. They perceive reality through a materialist, realist lens focused on what can be measured, proven, and physically achieved. As an earth sign, Capricorn is rationally centered, meaning the mind uses logic and sound judgment to arrive at conclusions. The moon here knows things through rational, tangible, and concrete results. Also, the mind here is geared towards intuiting and avoiding possible negative consequences, acutely aware of potential dangers, difficulties, and undesirable outcomes. And this is because Capricorn is a tamasic sign. Tamasic signs are motivated to act based on the avoidance of suffering. And so this means that the mind is primarily motivated to act to solve problems or avoid negative consequences. So people with the moon in Capricorn are acutely aware of potential dangers, difficulties, and negative outcomes. The main motivation is, how do I avoid pain? How do I avoid trouble? There is a deep-seated belief that the world is a cruel place full of problems and material hardships, and their best hope is to minimize suffering through hard work and elevated status in society. People with the moon in Capricorn tend to be strategically enduring and very resilient individuals. They're built to survive the physical realm through diligent work and persistent effort. And this is because in vedicastrology, Capricorn is actually depicted as an ancient, large alligator type, crocodile type of animal. And as you probably know, crocodiles and alligators have pretty much survived in their current form for a very, very long time. They're one of the most ancient creatures currently alive on planet Earth. And that's because they are so evolved to adapt to their environment in the best possible ways. They're such alpha predators that they literally don't really need to evolve through thousands and thousands of years of evolution because they're already kind of functioning at their best. And so just like the crocodile that inhabits marshes, Moon and Capricorn people are the ultimate survivors. They have adapted their survival mechanisms to dominate an inhospitable environment. A lot of the times, people with strong Capricorn placements have had to endure hardships early in life. Capricorn is not a very easy sign to manage, as after all, it's ruled by Saturn, and Saturn is about survival and about difficult karma and overcoming challenges. And so it's very possible that people had difficult upbringings, difficult environments that they had to grow out from and evolve through their strength and resilience and cleverness. And so people with displacement tend to be strategic, tenacious, crafty, built to survive the physical realm through diligent work and persistent effort. They are influenced by Saturn, giving them fundamental awareness that individual existence is fleeting and fragile, so they're hyper aware of potential problems in life. They have a strong sense of duty. They take their responsibilities very seriously. Because they're ruled by Saturn, there is a strong sense of duty here and perseverance. So at their best, people with displacement can create a karma yogi mentality where they focus on performing their duties without becoming overly attached to the results. So, in spiritual practices, it's more about the actions and the intentions rather than chasing a sort of a specific material goal on earth. They take their perceived duties with utmost seriousness and will fulfill responsibilities with patience, logic, diligence, and the commitment to seeing things through, no matter how long it takes or how difficult it might be. People with the moon in Capricorn may come to love work and fulfilling their professional responsibilities. There is a bit of a workaholic tendency here. They're fully dedicated to their work, their legacy, and their efforts to ensure financial stability for them and their family, physical health as well, and material security for themselves and everyone in their care. So their identity is built on their accomplishments and their professional standing. They take pride in their reputation and skills and seek to be respected for providing high-level service that helps others deal with their own pains and survival issues. This is a bit of a workaholic placement because the moon is about what we love, our emotional connections, and Capricorn is a very work and duties and responsibilities focused sign. So people with this placement might end up really loving to be of service, might love working, and so much so that they actually don't feel that relaxed when they're supposed to be relaxing. They're fully dedicated to their work, to their legacies, to their efforts to ensure financial stability, physical health, and material security for themselves, but also their loved ones, everyone in their care. Their identity is built on their accomplishments and professional standing, and they take pride in their reputation and skills and seek to be respected for providing high-level service that helps others deal with their own pains and survival issues. Because earth signs are Vaishya signs. Vaishya signs are all about perfecting our craft and being of service to humanity through our unique set of skills. If everyone perfects a set of skills and wants to contribute to the world with their skills, the world would be an amazing place, right? If everyone does their job really diligently and properly. And this is what Capricorn is very equipped to do because they take their duties and responsibilities and commitments very seriously. Because Capricorn is a movable sign, people with this placement tend to always be open to changes and innovations available in their environment to improve their social status or material lot in life. So they apply these changes to their material life because it's an earth sign. They adapt their approach based on changing circumstances and new responsibilities as well, and they're strategic in how they navigate obstacles and opportunities. Capricorn is described as a large-bodied sign, and so Moon here craves a sense of personal prominence, typically achieved through diligent work toward growing in their professional field. Their identity is built on their accomplishment and their professional standing. They measure life through concrete realities and take pride in being recognized for their competence and contributions, because again, we're talking about an earth sign. Earth signs want results. They want material manifestations of results. So the moon here is very attached to earthly situations, earthly outcomes. They wouldn't just be happy with ideas and lofty goals. They tend to be focused on productive gains and the development of practical skills. Again, Earth and Saturn, a lot of practicality here. Capricorn is the most grounded, realistic, practical, pragmatic sign. They want to build something tangible, to demonstrate their competence, to create lasting value through their efforts. And work itself is a form of emotional expression and security for them. You will find that a lot of people with moon in Capricorn tend to be quite ambitious, and they try to really reach the height in their career, but they don't do it in very radical, flashy ways, because Capricorn and Saturn in general is about long-term success, about diligence and results coming with the force of time. They're not really one-hit type of wanderers. They want to put in the work consistently, and they trust that with time, if they perform their duties and responsibilities properly, they will be rewarded. They're relatively psychologically thick-skinned, so Moon and Capricorn people build their identity on their ability to maintain indifference to emotions, or at least to manage their emotions in a way that they don't affect their actions too much. They try to achieve mental robustness and independence. Let's keep in mind that Mars is exalted in the sign of Capricorn, and Mars is the warrior. So basically, the general and the warrior who wins the war is someone who can really manage their emotions and not be led by panic, by fear, by greed. They just kind of have to follow a certain strategy and be quite emotionally nimble and resilient through the ups and downs until they see the task to completion. So they develop a thick skin as a survival mechanism in a harsh world, and this emotional containment allows them to function effectively in difficult circumstances without being too emotionally overwhelmed. So what are the core emotional needs with displacements? First of all, Moon and Capricorn people tend to feel best when they're materially safe and secure in life. Without material security, security, they can't really fully relax or open their heart. And even if in early age they might be a little bit more adventuristic, soon they realize that they have responsibilities towards their families, towards their friends and loved ones, towards their bosses, for example. And they're kind of driven by the sense of responsibility to perform at their best and to be very diligent and hardworking. And because Capricorn is a female sign, the moon here behaves best and finds contentment when the individual feels materially safe. So it's all about feeling safe first and then acting in the best way possible. So security here is the prerequisite for any emotional opening or trust. Another part of their emotional needs is this need for tangible results. They need to see concrete evidence of security, some stable income, assets, a solid home, or financial reserves. Intangible promises or emotional reassurance alone cannot really satisfy their need for safety. They believe emotional support means working towards the material, earthly safety and status of their loved ones. So it's a very tangible way to express their love and to feel loved as well. Their ideal partner is someone who also takes responsibilities very seriously and appreciates them for being responsible. Someone who takes life seriously, shares their commitment to building something lasting, because Saturn is very much about legacy. Someone who understands that showing love means ensuring practical security and stability for those that you love. As you can imagine, they show and feel love through acts of service and provision. So very, very tangible, very grounded and pragmatic ways. Nothing too sentimental, nothing too emotionally fleeting or romantic. So they express care and love through practical action, providing financial security to their loved ones, maintaining the home, ensuring physical health and comfort, giving useful practical gifts. These concrete actions are their primary love language. They need partners who understand and appreciate this practical expression of devotion. They want to be valued for their reliability and capabilities, the tangible value that they provide to others. And so they need partners who really appreciate their hard work, their dedication, their commitment to building security. You know, partners who want to often go on holidays, to constantly go out and socialize, go to parties, go to bars and restaurants every week might not be the best fit, because such partners need a lot of time away from work, and the moon in Capricorn person actually feels that they just can't afford to waste that much time on, so-called frivolous activities. They prefer to be focused on their goals. And so a partner who will feel bored or unloved if they're not constantly taken on trips, on vacations, to restaurants and parties, might feel a little bit stagnant and unappreciated here. So what a moon in Capricorn person needs is not only the right partner who will be okay with this kind of bit of a workaholic tendency or serious approach to life and responsibilities, but also a partner who really likes that in a partner, someone who recognizes their competence and contribution and who appreciates material stability just as much as they do. They need partners who understand that their emotional distance is protective and not rejecting, that they can seem a little bit cold, a little bit aloof because they retain and suppress a lot of their emotions. And that doesn't mean they don't hold a lot of love in their hearts or tenderness. It's just that they're used to not expressing it so openly because it creates a sense of vulnerability, similarly to moon in Scorpio. They need partners patient enough to wait while they slowly learn to open their hearts, show their vulnerable side, someone who won't demand frequent emotional expression, or at least emotional expression too early on in the relationship. So they value patience and understanding of their defensive mechanisms, and that's crucial for a successful relationship. So what are the potential shadow sides and challenges with this placement? First of all, because moon and Capricorn people view emotions as sources of kind of instability and fragility, they often suppress and contain their emotional responses to maintain inner control. Moon and Capricorn people can fear the chaos of uncontrolled feeling, and so there is an existential need here to face physical reality through the development of psychological distance from emotional reactivity. And this can be a bit of a painful placement because moon is exactly the type of planet that we need to express our vulnerability with, our fluctuating emotions. We need to be openly emotionally expressive. That's how our partner understands when we're happy, when they're sad, so they can be there for us. If your partner upsets you and you don't show emotionally that you're upset, how would they ever learn how to treat you better, how to act accordingly? And anyone who is exceedingly emotionally suppressed can create these kinds of problems in relationships. So moon in Capricorn can be a difficult placement because it can be difficult for the partner to really read the emotional temperature of the individual. They also tend to struggle with being emotionally open, playful, and spontaneous. There can be a bit of a emotional coldness there because anywhere we have Saturn, there can be aloofness, there can be rigidity and coldness. So the spontaneity and free emotional reactivity that the moon needs to connect with others and develop trust, intimacy, and a sense of belonging is blocked by their fears and realistic awareness of dangers. So they struggle to be open. They need to kind of control their own emotions, to manage the chaos, so to speak, and that prevents them from being more carefree and playful, which again can be a little bit difficult for some partners. They tend to fear emotional vulnerability. They like to project an aura of strength, and they have a deep-seated fear of spontaneity as well. They fear that opening emotionally will expose them to pain, loss, or chaos. So they try to control their emotions as a survival mechanism, not realizing that this control prevents genuine connection sometimes, and it keeps them from being truly connected to others. They can be surrounded by a lot of friends, a lot of acquaintances, but ultimately nobody really knows what goes on inside of them because they're quite emotionally controlled and retentive. At the same time, Moon and Capricorn people can be a little bit too focused on material provision, a little bit too focused on their work duties and responsibilities at the expense of true emotional presence. They can become so dedicated to building financial security and maintaining their professional status that they neglect the emotional needs of their partners. If you're so busy building an empire, or focusing on your material responsibilities, or providing the best possible professional service to your clients, then something has to give, and that's usually the personal sphere. So they believe that work itself demonstrates love, but partners may still feel neglected. So they may view emotional intimacy as a bit of a luxury that they can't really always afford until their material security is fully complete, and that can stretch through time, and the goalpost can keep moving with displacement. Now, because this is a sign ruled by Saturn and it's a Tamasic sign, and the moon is how we perceive the world around us, the prism through which we experience life itself, people with Moon in Capricorn can struggle with feeling faith and optimism in life. They can sometimes be a little bit too realistic, too gloomy, unless there are other, placements that ensure a more positive outlook. So Jupiter is about happiness and abundance, right? Feeling lucky. And Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, which is Moon's own sign, and is debilitated in the sign of Capricorn. So faith here is at its weakest in the sign of Capricorn. So a mind that has no taste for faith is a gloomy, depression-prone mind, unfortunately. So people with the Moon in Capricorn can be vulnerable to persistent low moods, to pessimism, and to sometimes even depression despite external professional success. They can be a little bit too realistic and grounded for their own good, too acutely aware of what can go wrong in life. Inevitably, the professional success may not be as emotionally fulfilling as they had hoped, because we are still human beings and we crave genuine connection with other people, and we also need to afford ourselves to be comfortable once in a while, to relax and, forget about work and responsibilities. And so sometimes they can achieve material success, but still feel unfulfilled or burnt out. They may appear cold or indifferent to others sometimes, so their emotional containment and thick-skinned persona can make them appear cold, indifferent, or uncaring. And it doesn't mean that they're those things. They can be very sensitive internally. It's just that they have the habit of retaining that and suppressing the expression of that. So they may be labeled by others as unromantic or a bit robotic because they struggle to express their feelings a little bit. So people may misunderstand their reserve as a lack of care. And finally, their preoccupation with material reality, survival, and avoiding pain prevents them from living in the now, from feeling joy in very simple, very ordinary pleasures. So they're always focused on the next problem to solve, the next threat to manage, the next project at work to be accomplished, to be completed. And so this preoccupation with survival, with material realities, with work responsibilities can prevent them from finding joy in the everyday life and to relax a little bit and distract the mind from all this kind of seriousness that goes inside. So this is what I wanted to share about the Moon in Capricorn. Moving on to the Moon in Aquarius, what are the typical traits, qualities, and unique strengths associated with the Moon in the sign of Aquarius? First of all, they're very intellectually centered, very analytical. They They are an air sign. And the moon here knows through communication, knows because moon is described as a planet that is filled with knowing. So the way that they arrive at knowledge is through communication and through applying their intelligence. They derive understanding through intellectual perceptions, through logical analysis. Their main means of connecting with others and adapting to the world is through collaboration and communication. It's a very team-oriented sign. It's the 11th sign of group activity. So they innately believe that the best way to improve one's life is through intelligence, progress, communication, and co-creating with others. They also value social connection and measure their individuality within the context of society and democracy. They're very interested usually in politics and social sciences and history and understanding how various sectors and aspects of civilizations work. They thrive in groups, associations, and social circles united by shared interests, hobbies, or goals. So there need to be shared interests here. It's not socialization for the sake of just going for a party. They need to have something in common that they can bond with, typically goals and causes that they support. Aquarius is a tamasic sign, meaning that the mind is primarily activated by the need to remove trouble or burdens in life. They're emotionally motivated to live in a way that minimizes suffering and threats. And so once they're free from major burdens and troubling issues, they become actually very content and very steady in life. They don't really require constant external excitement or emotional reassurance to feel happy. They can be quite clear-headed because this is an air sign of kind of intellectual analysis, and they're ruled by Saturn, so they're able to see both the good and the bad quite clearly. This realism can give them a reputation for being somber and gloomy, and just like the moon in Capricorn, they don't wear rose-colored glasses and prefer to see things as they are. Sometimes reality is harsh, and they accept that. However, this realism can give them a reputation for being a little bit cold, a little bit distant. They just simply have a sober, realistic view of the world and of human nature. They tend to be humanistic and egalitarian. They have a natural ability to recognize the intrinsic value of all human beings, regardless of status or level of fulfillment. They find emotional satisfaction in the human denominator, the simple foundational aspects of existence that connect everyone on Earth. So Aquarius people don't really like elitism, and they identify with the struggles of the average person at the grassroots level. So they're often driven by a natural urge to preserve the planet and to benefit society somehow. Moon and Aquarius people tend to be natural networkers and social beings because this is, after all, an air sign, and they have a strong sense that multiple people means wider variety of skills and multiplied effort. So they're great in team projects. They're often quite likable, quite popular, and they have a natural ability to find the human denominator, the common ground that allows them to socialize easily with very diverse sets of people. They feel that they have a duty to help society somehow and to help people live better lives. There is a very interesting opposition here. So Leo is about the self, about unique, individualistic self-expression, and Aquarius is opposite of Leo. So actually people with strong planets in Aquarius can be very, very popular in groups because they just project this aura of lack of ego, that they're not too self-absorbed, that they don't really let things bother their ego too much, and that can be very appealing to people. So they can easily become group leaders or at least very popular within their groups. They have a very secure sense of self. As a fixed sign, they have a firmly established idea of who they are, what they like and what they dislike. So they accept their own individuality without needing grand ideas about who they are. Again, this is the opposite sign of Leo. They don't need grand, ambitious, notions about their lives. They simply are the way they are, and they want others to be okay with them just as they are with themselves. Moon in Aquarius can be a very loyal placement. Their fixed nature makes them very loyal to their partners, to family members, and anyone that they consider part of their tribe, especially people they feel responsible for. Saturn is the planet of paying our dues and fulfilling our responsibilities, and they do this through thick and thin, basically. So they fulfill their perceived duties and responsibilities with dedication and consistency, and they don't really do it in a begrudging way. They just do it by default without even having to think about it. So this can be a very, very conducive placement for great family relationships, for great friendships as well. They tend to be natural at building friendship and camaraderie with others. They can maintain relationships with acquaintances, colleagues, casual friends, and useful contacts with ease. They're naturally open-minded and accepting of others. They're psychologically healthy happy and emotionally fulfilled within themselves, and they're able to relate to others from a place of oversupply rather than need. Of course, this is unless there are afflictions to the moon in the chart. So what do moon and Aquarius people really need to be happy, safe, and content? First of all, if they are to be partnered up, their partners must really align with them on their core values, political leanings, and worldview. These are very important to them. They require partners who accept them as they are, and shared principles are essentials to emotional compatibility for them. Their self-worth is tied to living according to a specific set of values and principles, and so their partners need to also be aligned with those principles. Intellectual compatibility is very important to them as well. They need partners they can communicate with meaningfully and collaborate with intellectually. So shared interests, hobbies, causes, and goals provide important bonding ground for the moon in Aquarius. They find emotional fulfillment in intellectual stimulation and meaningful dialogue with partners who can engage their mind. Again, this is an air sign, so they express love through communication and collaboration and shared ideas. They need the freedom to be themselves. People with the moon in Aquarius can be very accepting of others, very tolerant to others, and so they require the same freedom and acceptance in return. They want partners who don't try to change them, but rather accept their individuality as it is, because remember, this is a fixed sign, so they're not really likely to change very much. They respect their partner's individuality and autonomy, maintaining healthy boundaries while remaining loyal and supportive. So acceptance is a big component of intimate relationships for Moon and Aquarius people. And when we talk about acceptance, this extends to their whole self, their interests, their values, their way of being in the world. And they find emotional fulfillment in working together with partners towards shared goals that benefit society or their community. They love group projects, as we already discussed. So any partnerships built around meaningful causes or shared intellectual proclivities and leanings or collaborative projects feel very, very satisfying for them. So being part of something larger than themselves provides purpose and contentment. Also in relationships, they prefer freedom from very heavy emotional demands. So they need psychological safety and stability. A secure sense of self is foundational to their emotional well-being. And so once they're free of major burdens, they become quite contented. They don't require constant emotional reassurance or external excitement to feel happy. And again, they can be a little bit aloof. They can have an aura of coldness about them because they're so emotionally restrained. Similarly to Moon and Capricorn, there is a control here. There is a psychological resilience which kind of blocks them a little bit from being very warm, affectionate, and emotionally expressive. And so that can be a little bit challenging for partners in relationships because they don't really understand where they stand with the moon in Aquarius. And finally, they need connection without suffocation. They need partners who understand their need for space, autonomy, independence, and friendships outside of the relationship. They thrive with partners who respect their involvement in groups and causes and partnerships, and they require freedom to maintain their broader social and community connections without feeling trapped. So partners who are a little bit too possessive, who like exclusivity in the sense that they want to spend the majority of their time with their partner and not so much, in group activities, may not be very suited for them. Every moon placement has its potential shadow side, and so let's look at the potential challenges with the placement of moon in Aquarius. First of all, as we mentioned already, they can be a little bit cold and aloof in intimate relationships. Their intellectual approach can feel a little too detached, too surface level, so partners may feel emotionally neglected sometimes despite intellectual compatibility. So the moon in Aquarius thinks, if we can just talk a lot, if we have shared interests and goals and political beliefs and beliefs about society and morality, then perfect. That's the perfect partnership. So this kind of more emotional level bonding is a little bit foreign to them unless they have other placements in water signs. The air element here combined with Saturn's gloomy outlook creates a reputation for being a little bit cold, a little bit somber and gloomy, and the moon needs to feel content and at home in intimate environments, but their reliance on intellectualism can feel a little bit too impersonal for a truly nurturing bonding connection at the intimate level. So this is a placement that is really, really conducive to collaborations and to friendships. Most people tend to really like people with the moon in Aquarius. They can be very easygoing, very intelligent, very fun. but on an intimate level, there can be challenges with this kind of lack of emotional expressiveness. Another potential challenge is the rigidity of political and ideological views. Their fixed nature extends to their views and affiliations, and they can develop very rigid ideas about how the world works and how the world should work. So at their worst, they can create polarized thinking that separates people into camps of allies and enemies. So are you with us? Are you against us? And so their principles can really evolve into inflexible dogma rather than evolving frameworks. Another potential challenge, which is similar to other fixed placements, is that they can be a little bit stuck in their ways. Being a fixed sign, they are slow to change emotionally and maintain consistent principles, which can become limiting. And so sometimes their lack of adaptability may prevent them from taking advantage of great opportunities, especially in their personal life. They may be a little bit emotionally unavailable when partners most need them. The moon is the planet, as we said, of spontaneous connection with the environment, but their rigidness prevents the flexibility needed for emotional spontaneity and presence. And so they struggle with purely emotional bonding and may not recognize the importance of emotional presence over intellectual engagement. So they feel like if they just talk it out with you, then you should feel better. They don't see the problem with that. But, sometimes people are irrational. So air signs can struggle a little bit with this kind of lack of rationality of human connection sometimes. They can over-identify with causes over people. So it's more about the collective rather than the individual here. And they have a beautiful humanitarian impulse, but that can manifest a little bit as caring more about abstract causes and collective good than the individual people in their lives. So they may prioritize ideology over intimacy. And being egoless and seemingly neutral, they can convince themselves that they're being accepting when they're actually just being unavailable or indifferent to others. Finally, one of the challenges of this placement is that despite having many social connections or group involvements, they can still sometimes feel fundamentally isolated. Saturn is not an easy planet, and whenever it rules your kind of mindset, there can be a bit of an isolating, cold and aloof factor there. Their abundance of internal resources means that they don't really rely on deep emotional connection. They're very secure in themselves, and this can leave them actually feeling disconnected even in the midst of social activity. Their self-sufficiency can sometimes become a barrier of true intimacy. They don't need others emotionally, and they may struggle to understand why their partners do need them emotionally. And so they can seem a little bit emotionally unavailable at times. Finally, we come to the moon placed in the sign of Pisces, the 12th sign. And let's look at the unique traits, strengths, and qualities of this placement. First of all, people with the moon in Pisces tend to be gentle, compassionate, and with a benevolent nature and temperament. Pisces is a sattvic sign, meaning they're motivated by their true essence and innate goodness. They look for the good in themselves and other people, never wanting to intentionally cause harm, unless, of course, there are afflictions in the chart. Their nature is fundamentally kind and generous and forgiving, and oriented towards healing and upliftment of others. Also, people with the moon in Pisces tend to be very charming, and they tend to inspire tenderness in people. Others, I think, sense their benevolent nature, their sympathetic disposition, and they want to be kind to them and take care of them. There's a bit of fragility also with this placement, which endears people to them. And so they possess a natural magnetism that draws caretaking energy from those around them. Their presence invites gentleness from others. People with the moon in Pisces tend to be highly intuitive, psychically sensitive. They're emotional sponges that absorb the energy from the environment around them. As a water sign, the moon in Pisces knows things, so arrives at knowledge and wisdom through emotional presence and listening. And so they're highly receptive to psychic influences. They absorb emotions and energy from their environment indiscriminately. So like water, they absorb all energy around them, and they need time to rest, recuperate, and process their emotions. More than any other sign, they need to protect their energy from negative influences. This is the dissolution, the sign of dissolution of ego. It's the 12th sign in the zodiac. It's the completion of cycles, and they can have very indiscriminate energy, and their aura can be very penetrative to external influences. People with moon in Pisces tend to be quite creative creative and imaginative with a natural affinity for fantasy, art, and beauty in the world. This is a highly creative placement. It's ruled by Jupiter, it's a water sign, it's an imaginative sign. Moon is a very imaginative planet. They prefer experiences and states of mind that are lofty, dreamy, and colorful. They never lose their sense of magic, faith, and creativity in life. They're natural daydreamers with rich inner worlds. Venus is exalted in the sign of Pisces, indicating that the mental environment of the moon here is highly conducive to refined beauty, aesthetics, devotion, and idealistic passion as well. So this is really the sign of unconditional love. Moon in Pisces people tend to be profoundly empathetic and feeling-centered. They arrive at knowledge through emotional presence rather than through intellectual analysis. They're highly receptive and feel most validated when their internal state and feelings are respected by other people. They feel the suffering of all life around them more deeply than other people. This can be a very, very sensitive, very compassionate placement, and people with this placement need to really protect themselves from judgmental, negative and people who want to exploit them, really. Moon in Pisces seeks relationships and connections beyond rules, beyond boundaries. They're focusing instead on the simple act of joy, of love and devotion to a higher purpose. Intellectual or transactional relationships don't really fulfill them that well. They need soul level bonding. They need to completely merge with the other person. Their love is often very selfless, very unconditional, and they're willing to sacrifice and give endlessly to those that they love. So it's not a calculating placement, and they really need to learn how to be a little bit selective about who they're devoted to, because, with the wrong partners, they can be exploited and taken advantage of. They're capable of dissolving the ego boundaries and merging with universal consciousness, because Pisces is where ego dissolves, and they have the capacity to be selfless and release any kind of self-absorption. They feel as one with everyone around them, allowing for higher levels of compassion and access to higher consciousness. They want relationships that allow for the dissolution of boundaries between you and me. So there is no mine and yours when it comes to relationship with Moon and Pisces people. Two people basically merge together and function as one. So there is no space for ego and selfishness here. They tend to be sattvic in nature, as we already mentioned. They believe in beautiful possibilities in life. They look for the good in themselves and others, and prefer to envision the world as benign and benevolent. Any kind of negative outlook is really not going to make them happy in the long run. They prefer to be a little bit unrealistic, a little bit believing in magic, wearing rose-colored glasses, but that actually works better for them. They have an expansive nature and are innately attracted to knowledge, to higher perspectives, because again, Jupiter is about knowledge and wisdom, higher learning. They're attracted to charity, to spirituality, anything that expands the human mind and the life into multiple directions at once and even multiple dimensions. People with displacement are at their best when they have faith that circumstances will eventually improve through spiritual or creative processes. So optimism really goes a long way here. They're very forgiving and generous, as we mentioned. They express love through profound compassion and a maternal attitude towards all creation. So if Cancer is the mother energy, Pisces is the mother energy of the whole cosmos. So they want to nurture, they want to heal and uplift those that they love especially. Their benevolent disposition extends to forgiving other people's shortcomings, giving generously without expecting anything in return. And they're very romantic at heart. Venus is exalted in the sign of Pisces. So they have a lot of capacity for love, for romanticism, and for absolute selflessness. They're profoundly sensitive. They show love through creativity, romance, and idealistic gestures, and a lot of giving. It's a very charitable placement. So they can create beauty and magic in relationships. Their capacity for selflessness means that they may sacrifice greatly for those that they love, and they don't even think much of it. So what are the core emotional needs of people with Moon in the sign of Pisces? First of all, they need inner peace. They need time and space for contemplation, for sitting with their emotions and thoughts. They require significant time away from work, from heavy energy, from rigid structure. So if you're a Moon in Pisces, let me talk to your boss and tell them that they shouldn't overwork you, okay? Joking aside, Pisces needs a lot of rest. They're a Brahmin sign, and so they're focused on cultivating their inner resources, inner life, and they seek as much peace as possible to contemplate and get in touch with their inside world. So they need some time away from the material responsibilities of life and into a more kind of relaxing and dreamy world of their own. They can really benefit from reading, from creative pursuits, art, games involving imagination, or time in dreams. Literally sleeping can be extremely important for them. They need freedom to explore non-material realms and engage in creative and imaginative pursuits. Their mind needs space for the exploration that it craves. Pisces is symbolized by fish, and we're talking about the deep ocean here, the deep ocean of the human subconsciousness. And so they need space in their life to allow for exploring the richness of their inner world. Creative and imaginative expressions are essential outlets for their inner world and emotional processing. So again, they must prioritize rest, recuperation, and emotional processing. They need time to process the emotions that they've absorbed from the environment. And without this time, they can easily become burnt out, depleted, overwhelmed. They're psychic sponges, and so they need adequate recovery time to integrate and release the energy they absorb from others and their surroundings. Often you will find people with this placement being interested in spirituality, mysticism, fantasy worlds, or psychology because they need any kind of avenue to escape the harsh realities of life. The mundane reality is not really that interesting to them. They prefer to venture into more expansive territories of mind and spirit, and so they need transcendental experiences to feel emotionally fulfilled. In some people, this can be truly seeking spiritual outlets, but it can even be on the more basic level, just playing computer games, reading fantasy novels, playing fantasy board games with their friends, anything that allows them for their mind to play, to transport itself into a more magical, exploratory, imaginative world, really. One of their core needs is to surround themselves with people who understand their sensitive and dreamy nature. They feel most validated when their internal emotional state and feelings are respected and acknowledged. They need partners to understand and honor their emotional sensitivity rather than dismissing it as weakness. So someone who really cherishes how sensitive, how kind, how gentle they are, how vulnerable they are. Someone who really wants to take care of them just as they can take care of their partner. Their tender heart really is their gift, and it's not a flaw. So they need to be around kind, gentle, generous, and non-judgmental people who respect their feelings and inner world. Harsh criticism or coldness deeply wounds them. So they're very sensitive. So be careful how you speak to your Moon and Pisces friends. They have a need for surrender, for going with the flow. They find comfort in releasing control, allowing life to unfold naturally. So unlike, Mars ruled people, they're not so action oriented and goal focused. They prefer to surrender to destiny and allow life to unfold naturally, to go with the flow. And actually they can be quite lucky because they're ruled by Jupiter. So if you see them not being very motivated in life, not being very goal focused, don't worry about it. Let them go with the flow. Life will take care of them because they're ruled by Jupiter. And they're a water sign, so they intuitively connect to the right opportunities. The moon here finds greatest comfort and happiness in going with the flow rather than forcing specific directions. They're symbolized by the fish, and the fish literally go with the flow, right? They're at their best when they have faith that circumstances will eventually improve through spiritual and creative processes, ideally. Finally, they crave connection that goes beyond surface level. They need relationships that allow for emotional fluidity, acceptance, understanding their boundless nature. They want the dissolution of boundaries. Again, there is no you and me here, yours and mine. They're just two people who assimilate into one another. So merging consciousness is a big theme, becoming one. They're naturally drawn to idealistic passion, to devotion, and they want relationships that feel spiritual, transcendent, and filled with romance and beauty. And on a more basic level, they need a partner who's very compassionate, who's very caring, who pours love into them and makes them feel special and appreciated for their gentle nature. Finally, let's look at the potential shadow sides and potentially challenging aspects of this placement. First of all, they can struggle a bit with practical reality. Moon and Pisces tend to be quite bored of mundane reality and material issues, and also concrete responsibilities. So they may neglect real world consequences in favor of lofty, dreamy experiences. They like to kind of escape into their own world. They like to rest. They sometimes get a little bit surprised by the consequences of not following through on their material responsibilities. Mercury is debilitated in the sign of Pisces, and Mercury is the manager, right? Debilitated in Pisces means that Pisces is not a great sign for diligent systematization and organization. So they may struggle with practical matters, with responsibilities, with systematic thinking. They may be chronically disorganized. Hello, ADHD. They may be sometimes late, sometimes forgetful, or unable to manage practical life details, solving problems, deadlines, and managing finances. So the mundane reality, unfortunately, is quite boring to them, and they prefer to escape into their fantasy world or simply to rest, to sleep, and to recuperate. They can be also quite naive about the harsher realities of life because they're all accepting and indiscriminate and gentle in nature. They also expect that other people are like them, that other people are generous and caring and selfless, and they can get mixed in with the wrong crowd of people. Their charming, tender nature and naivete about the harsher realities make them vulnerable to exploitation sometimes. They can also be, unfortunately, vulnerable to manipulation, to toxic people who want to take advantage of them, because they struggle to discern who is safe and who isn't. Again, Mercury is the planet of discernment, of discrimination. They can absorb negative influences without resistance. They can get mixed in with the wrong crowd, and others may take advantage of their kindness and willingness to help. Out of all the signs in the zodiac, Pisces is the most vulnerable to negative influences, unfortunately. So they need conscious protection of their energy. They need discernment in choosing what to absorb and who to associate with. As psychic sponges, they absorb energy from their environment very indiscriminately. And so without protection, they become overwhelmed by other people's emotions, the world's suffering, and negative influences can really affect them very strongly. This can lead to emotional exhaustion and depression, so they need partners who protect them and help them discern what's safe and what isn't. Another potential challenging aspect of Moon in Pisces is the instability of their identity. Pisces is fundamentally abstract and fluid and makes it poorly suited for the Moon's desire to create a clear, undistorted self-image, because Moon is our ego, our sense of self, our idea of separate existence. And the sign of Pisces, which is very fluid and indiscriminate, this is a little bit of a challenging position for us to really define who we are, what we think, and what we want. And so this often leads to self-doubt, to lack of clarity, lack of ideas regarding what they truly need to be happy, and they struggle to know who they really are. So again, they're very susceptible to external influences and manipulation. They can also struggle to prioritize their own needs and to put themselves first. They consciously need to work on focusing on their own needs and wants, rather than getting lost in what others project onto them. The dissolution of boundaries between self and others can lead to loss of identity and loss of self-protection. They may lose themselves in relationships or absorb other people's problems and negative emotions as if they were their own. There can be moral ambiguity with displacement, unfortunately, so without grounding, they can lose sense of ethical clarity as well. So at the low levels of manifestation of the sign, displacement can blur the lines between right and wrong, because again, we're talking about merging with the divine and lack of any kind of borders or discrimination. So they can sometimes rationalize unethical behavior as being accepting and non-judgmental. They may engage in deception or moral confusion at their worst. This is, of course, depending on other challenging factors in the chart. Moon in Pisces on its own can't really do that, but they may use spirituality to avoid dealing with practical, emotional, or psychological work, what they call spiritual bypassing, I think. And finally, one of the potential challenges of this placement is escapism and unhealthy coping. So they may resort to unhealthy, sometimes escape mechanism to satisfy the need for altered consciousness. They can easily get tempted to venture into dangerous, unfamiliar territories of the mind and psyche, losing their sense of groundedness in reality. So they need to really practice discrimination. The opposite sign of Pisces is Virgo. So if they feel a little bit unbalanced, they feel like they're losing a little bit of control in their life, they need to connect with someone with strong Virgo energy in their chart. The opposite energy of Pisces is Virgo. Someone with strong Mercury who can really help them organize their life, organize their thoughts and principles, and they really gain a sense of direction. because, you know, their need for escape, for altered states of consciousness can lead to susceptibility to addictions at its worst. So substances, fantasy, hidden affairs can be potential here, experimental sexuality even, or any other compulsive behavior that provides some kind of escape from reality. I hope you guys enjoyed my interpretations of the moon through the different signs. I tried to pack as much information and value within these interpretations as I possibly could, and I hope you found them useful. I'm very much looking forward to you sharing your impressions, your experience with the different signs of the moon. Let me know if this resonated with you, if you felt seen, and if talking about the shadow aspects was helpful for you to, you know, identify potential patterns where things can be improved upon. And yeah, I look forward to hearing your thoughts. Thank you so much for liking and commenting on my videos. Thank you for following my channel for other such content on the topic of astrology. And I look forward to seeing you in the next videos. Thank you very much. Bye.